Welcome everybody to part 2 of the Radial presentation. Thank you for being here with us tonight. To start us off, I'm going to give you a quick recap of what was discussed in part 1 and 2. Before I get to that, I'd like to just say that this presentation is for edutainment purposes only, and any forward-looking price statements are not to be used as financial advice. We are not financial advisors, except to ourselves. We feel it is in the best interest of society at large to expose the truth, the deep truths of the psyche, of the mind, of the species at this unique point in history. And it's very exciting and interesting and fun to share this information because it has very real world-changing effects and impacts on our market decisions and in our personal lives. So make sure to position yourselves accordingly and never to take life too seriously. Last Thursday, we went through 2 parts. Part 1 was on the resistance, and part 2 was on reorienting and thinking about life on Earth and from a new standpoint, from a market standpoint, from a sound money standpoint, and from the perspective of time, energy, and currency and what that meant. Tonight, we're going to be digging into parts 3, 4, and 5, which will try to synthesize the energy and time component. And we're going to bring forward some interesting new technologies in the manifest segment that you may or may not be aware of. And in the final segment on Evolve, we're going to try to help you understand more deeply your own mental structures and your own frameworks for how to understand things as they happen to you as you grow and you evolve through life. That relies on your participation just as well to be very aware of these concepts. We'll dig into that as we go. So just a quick recap, part 1, time, energy, and currency. We're moving out of the old world. We're moving away. We're not moving out of leveraged debt cycles, but we are definitely speeding up these market cycles because of the data rate and bit rate at which information is transforming the world, because it is literally compressing time, because as new technologies are invented, they make life simpler, easier, or more productive in some way. Some technologies become resistance, some technologies become progressive. And essentially what you have is these debt cycles that basically weeds out the failing stuff and brings forward the good stuff. We talked a little bit about powerful people in the energy sector, healthcare, population growth, national currencies, the world power dynamic. And so I'll show you a few slides just so you remember, but we're talking tonight about mostly is the new world, where we're headed, what this could mean, and to try to present it in a way that's kind of positively framed, because most people don't even really fully comprehend the amount of new cool stuff that's coming out. So here's just a quick slide on the market cycles. Everything is debt accumulation, then you have the deleveraging event, and then reflation is when the smart money buys your bags for pennies to dump on you in the next bull market. There's a lot of nasty people in the world. They were in control for a long time, but every single day they are losing their grip on that control structure. And you can see it. You can see it in the way that the Fed is limited in their response to inflating money supplies, or the global impact of a giant, I gotta be careful how I say this, scamdemic, how that was handled. There's a lot of restructuring going on because we're all fighting over these energy resources. There's really 3 main pots. Who's got the money? Who's got the people and labor? Who's got the raw materials? That's essentially what's driving this world power dynamic. We talked a little bit about the 4 levers of the Fed and how they can try to control them and adjust the money supply to make what's historically been pretty effective at keeping the money supply and the economy within the safety rails of what they think is best to keep the economy growing. It worked for a very long time. We've had some of the most prosperous times in history. However, there are still countries getting raped and pillaged, and they're fed up and they're tired of it because of this. Because the US gets to touch the inflation first, and they continually to debase it from their own people and from other countries. So they're sick of it, and they're coming together to try to amass massive reserves of the longest standing sound money on earth, which was gold. I wouldn't doubt if they're saving digital assets as well, wouldn't you? And they're going to replace it with some sort of a blockchain platform. It's going to take down the SWIFT system. At least that's their aim. This is called the fourth turning. It's when you turn a crisis into a changing of a dynamic world order. Then in part 2, we talked about the layers of an economy, how it goes from simple mother nature, natural timing, to through the love economy, understanding that society really is built at the familial level because we are mammals. And then on top of that, you get the different monetized sectors of the economy. We've all seen an adoption chart, but we wanted to take it a step further. We wanted to show you how these adoption cycles go through waves, and that essentially everything in life is an energy wave. From progress to resistance, progress to resistance. And as the resistance begins to fade over time and more of a technology or idea is adopted, the swings and bull markets get bigger, and the old tech dies off, and the skepticism fades. Here you have that same cycle overlaid onto a 13,000 year long chart of the technology and population growth of our species as we go superluminal, meaning faster than light, meaning a truly mentally connected species, in the same way that a mycelium fiber network is also a connected species. We are all like little cogs in the wheel. We each play our role, and this is the curve of our evolution over time and the shrinking of the space between us. And I mean that both space in time and space, or time in space. So the amount of time that it takes us to get through space has shrunk. Our words and thoughts are now reaching each other at superluminal velocities, which is creating the approaching of the singularity, which is the ultimate movement toward an interstellar species. How do we get there? Well, we need to bootstrap it off of a solid, sound money system. So that's why we're all interested in. We're all interested in the money aspect. We're all interested in fixing the money aspect because, as shown and laid out before, the old system is dying, and centralized control structures have failed us. And in order for this to be more balanced globally, it's probably a good idea to bootstrap it on top of a decentralized and powerful computing network. So we talked just briefly on, not even just we talked at length about what a real cryptocurrency really is. And I think, I don't care if it's called Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Hex, or some other coin that follows a similar sound money principle with a fixed supply inflation. Those essentially are going to be where a lot of the value will end up and get stored. We made a pretty good case for it so far for the last 2 years.
What's up, guys? It's your boy GRC. What a pleasure to be here today. After last week I was not prepared to stay up late. This week I am. I am so excited to be on this panel. The amount of good comments I got in my DMs about last week was absolutely phenomenal. Talking to Orca, Whales, Bullish, Axis they are my friends. I feel like, I don't know if I'm their friends, but they are my friends. Talking to them makes me feel absolutely, I just feel like I'm learning and on a spiritual path, and that's what we're going towards here. Guys, let's welcome on the panel.
Dude, we're your friends. What are you talking about, man?
Well, you can't be sure because we don't necessarily know each other, so I don't know exactly if that counts. But me and Sam are definitely friends.
I've got Pokegon. We're friends.
You and Sam are definitely friends, but also have never met each other in real life.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've never
We're
met any of
friends.
my friends.
We're friends. We're buddies.
Imran, have you ever met any of your online acquaintances ever in life? You haven't, dude. Okay.
I met Motley, but that's because we lived near each other.
Just
when he was
wait, bro,
young.
because that first
never met one.
you're bringing me back, bro, because back when I was 18, I was playing professional video games, and that was my first experience meeting a group of people that I had known for 4 years
I'm
online.
jealous that you got to play professional video games with your bros.
Dude, that's neither here nor there. The point of the story is, check this out. I was playing online for 4 years with these guys, never saw their face, never knew who they were. And the first time you meet face to face, it is like you've just seen somebody that you've known for 1,000 years. That's like what it feels like. There's no disconnect. If anything, it's like it's just more normal. Like you almost feel like you've already been together before. That's the experience that I've had over and over and over for years as you meet people from the online world in real life.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, I spend time with you guys because I enjoy spending time with you guys. You know, it's like we're not coworkers out here. Like I have a coworker, right? If I'm at a job, like I don't have to chat with any of you. I'd like chatting with you guys.
Pretty much.
I've never had a coworker. but I know-
Yeah, likewise. Same
I
thing
know-
with me.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible that you can connect over the internet now. You can connect with people in real time over the internet. Your hearts and souls can actually be. Dude, I've told Sam every intimate detail of my life, every single one. And I've never met him. And I've known him for 6 years, and I just reached out to him on the internet. So like things can manifest just like Axis was saying there, and it's happening. And I'm more grateful this time around because I can see it. Like I know I can catch people's vibes faster, and this is a group of guys that I like to be around.
100, man. I appreciate you more than you know. It's been good so far. I caught that fire from day one coming from you, bro. So, what do you guys think, man? You want to start into these slides right away, or anybody got anything they want to say before we get going?
Just put your seatbelts on. You know, hands inside the vehicle at all
It's
times.
gonna be a wild ride. Yeah, we're gonna dig deep. So, part 3, synthesis. What are we synthesizing today? Frequency, aka time, technology, evolution. Well, what does evolution mean? When I think of evolution, I think about a process that happens over millions of years to a species and the adaptations of their physical bodies over very long periods of time. But the human doesn't seem, it seems like a lot of the adaptation that's happening on the human level is not necessarily I mean, we are physically changing. We are getting taller, we are getting stronger, we're getting smarter. Our biology isn't necessarily, we're not growing wings or claws, but it's because those tools are just that, tools. So my hope is that by presenting some tools to you today, you will be able to take that knowledge and change the fucking world. Like literally. This is so much bigger than just one person. Like I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't driven by something else to do this. I don't spend time on this stuff because it's fun. I spend time on this stuff because it's fun and it's going to change the world. So the future is trending towards science fiction. Does that make it a fact? I don't know. I remember what it was like to live in a pre-internet world. It looked nothing like what the post-internet world looks like. So it begs to question what the world might look like in 100 years from now. What might the world look like if we harness insane amounts of energy? Right here, Type 2 civilization is defined as a species that can harness the power of their entire star. Not merely transforming starlight into energy, but controlling the star. several methods have been proposed for this, the most popular of which is the Dyson sphere. So we can accomplish this. We don't even need to necessarily harness the power of our entire sun, our physical sun. We just need to, we don't need to do it by putting a net around the sun and stealing the light energy off it. We could probably be a lot smarter about that and recreate little neutron suns or do something else we can approach this problem from a bunch of different angles, I guess is my point. What do you guys got to add to this?
I think that's a lot of the thesis behind the technology of nuclear power, right? And even like cold fission and things like that is how do you tap into that, relatively speaking, like unlimited power that can be produced when particles in highly excitable ways. So whether you're getting the power directly from the sun or if you're replicating the form of energy derision that comes from like structures and process and systems, I think that that's ultimately a far future of energy than continuing down the path of what has gotten us into the Industrial Revolution age and the technology boom.
I would agree. I also think that we talked a little bit about oil and how everything's propped up on the oil markets right now. And, you know, over time, slowly, I mean, as the resistance starts to fade on that front, we might be having a lot more of this more easily accessible and more closer to infinite energy sources, which would just compound our ability to change the landscape even at an even faster rate than we already are, which is scary to think about. And it actually kind of partially explains why progress has been so slow for 30 plus years. So this slide has a lot of text on it, and I don't want you to get scared of that. So let me bring your focus first to the right under the brainwave section. You'll see a square here with 3 white lines inside and an oscillating energy wave over it. And they're supposed to represent frequency. So if the white line is truth, the red line is a person's crossing of truth. So as a person seeks knowledge in the world, they're going to cross the line of truth at different rates of change based on how much information you're taking in and absorbing and synthesizing in an accurate way. And how this basically is what creates for you a life path and is what gives you purpose and fulfillment and keeps you aligned and on your path. And the argument here is that if you can find a fulfilling life and you can keep in alignment and you can continue to increase your frequency, your energy wave would become indistinguishable from the white line itself, which is the closest thing to truth that a human could live by, right? So you can think of this not only as individual, you can think of this as individual people at different levels of alignment, or you can think of this as your own brainwave activity between like when you're waking up from sleep to when you're super jacked up on caffeine and learning new things every second. That's in alignment with your highest truth. You can apply this in many ways because the universe is holographic and these principles of natural law apply in so many ways to everything that you're going to experience. And it's also going to, by knowing this stuff, you'll become a better market actor as well, because you'll begin to understand people's emotional decisions better, people's planning. You'll be able to understand these things better because you'll know the key fragments of reality that are driving those decisions. So the first principle of mentalism is that everything is mind, the universe is mental, and intention is the driver. What does that mean? Everything that you experience is a social construct or something that somebody told, some information that somebody gave you. So we basically live inside of like a mental net where it's a bunch of shared knowledge, and you basically try to pick through the pile of information. Just it could just be blank statement. It's just data, a big bucket of data, and you're trying to decipher and pick out the things that you're most in align with, so that your life progress and your life path is leading somewhere, which will lead to a beautiful life. And it's not some like naive thing. It's a real challenging experience that you'll go through. This isn't all fluffies and fluffy ponies and stuff. This is challenge, the good times and the bad. Everything is mental first. Anybody got you want to say something? I thought somebody was going to say.
I just like how you meant, harnessing as much energy as possible. Like you can nowadays, it's like what you can do, how much potential energy you can get by talking for 25 minutes in a Twitter space, doing a YouTube stream, and then like getting your best friends together and like doing some sort of course where everyone kind of meets in the middle. Like you can create so much energy without moving your ass, and like you can do it easily. But about being efficient and understanding, like being in your best self is like the hard part, right? Like doing things properly for the better good, for the long-term gain. That's what the hard part is. And that's like, as as I get older, I seem to have less super highs and super lows. I kind of starting to meet more in the middle, where I used to like be on top of the world and like just make huge mistake after huge mistake. It's like everything calms down as you get better friends, better people around you. As you learn all the things you're supposed to learn as you go.
That's a good point. Really good point.
I like the different illustrations of the wavelengths, like the alpha, beta, delta, gamma. People not hold like being flawed against yourselves. Like I'm a flawed human. I've yet to meet a flawless individual. If there was one, it was probably my granny. And the idea that you're constantly trying to, those of us that are aspiring to see truth, you're not going to every moment is on that line, right? You're missing it just a little bit, touching it here, missing it again. And I think some of us who have gone through different experiences with like consciousness expanding uh, experiments with that feeling, that euphoria of accessing temporarily that line of truth, only to be jostled off of it again and to experience an extremely high frequency of reconnecting to that enlightenment. Um, it's we tell these glorifications or these myths or these stories of individuals who maybe have existed on that line, and in my experience, it almost seems like a way for us to identify the noble pursuit of knowledge, even if attaining absolute knowledge of all things, right, is an impossible. That's why I kind of like these presentations that we're doing right now. Is when we focus on these large goals, sometimes it can feel daunting because there's this pressure to, like, I've made it. Now I know everything. Now I finally get it. Now I'm on the right path. And the reality is that the path involves stumbling off the path. And it requires that diversity of experience in order to appreciate that holistic center that we pursue.
Yes. Wales, you want to say anything about falling off the horse and getting back on?
It's one of those things that you really got to be cognizant of, right? Because that's a guarantee. You're always going to be able to get knocked down. Question is, are you going to be able to get back up again? And that's why playing the long game is always the best strategy.
Yes, sir. I agree. So the second principle, and by the way, Wales has been like probably the guy that never falls over, and when he does, he like just stood right back up, like levitated right back up, right? Because he's amazing like that. So, all right. So the second principle of natural law is correspondence, which just simply means as above, so below, as within, so without. The universe is holographic. This universe is wrapped in vibratory energy. So this is pretty simple to understand from like a lot of times you'll think about I sometimes I'll think about how like a supernova exploding looks like an iris of an eye. Like they look similar physically. Or like a mycelium network looks this similar to like the neural network inside your brain. Like these fractal patterns that are playing out in nature are the true DNA of what creation is. And so you'll see that with one example, it's enveloped in a similar way with another example. And the way it manifests is through fractal and vibration, which is the third principle of vibration, or the third principle of natural law, which is vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. If you can understand this, you can understand that your very words that you speak on a daily basis, or the words that enter your ear canals and enter your synapses of your own mind, these have very real charges and very real effects on your day. And so if you have resistances in your life that are telling you you aren't good enough, your crypto's a scam, you're an idiot for being in that stuff, it's too risky, or these are all conditioned responses that somebody told somebody else. And so you need to be able to dissect for yourself what the power of words are and also the power of vibration and energy. As we discussed previously, we talked a little bit about how the soundest money is that which is tracked both in space and time, space being the blocks and time being the chain. So it's interesting, right? Because that's literally the first digital version of trying to make these laws manifest in technology in a sound money sort of principle. So the fourth principle is polarity, which means everything has its pair of opposites, like light and dark, good and evil, male and female, these types of things. Everything has this pair of opposites, identical in nature but different in degree, or like the poles of the axis of the Earth itself, positive and negatively charged, because everything fundamentally is energy, which is charged positively or negatively. Just as in when you wake up every day, you have to decide, am I going to be a good person today or am I going to be a bad person today? And really, it's only the guy in the middle who doesn't make any decision that's really, truly lost in all this. Because if you didn't have the darkest of night, if you didn't have the bright sunlight, you would not have the balance of life. Which brings me to my fifth principle, which is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall, such as markets or seasons. So if you can recognize these markets rising or falling, you can recognize these patterns. This pattern recognition is your own intelligence, giving you insight into the true nature of behavior of your compadres on Earth. If you can understand yourself, ultimately you will understand them that much better. It says here, the pendulum of time manifests in everything. So everything has a rhythm, everything has a flow. Just as in money and currency having flows. And right now, on the macro stage, money is flowing from the west to the east and has been for 30 plus years, probably longer. And it's interesting, right? Because we're seeing a transitionary period where technology is completely restructuring all the old systems. This is the rhythm of Earth. This is the now time. This is the new age, so to speak. And I don't mean like new age quotes. I mean like a new time period for all of mankind. The sixth principle is the principle of cause and effect. Very easy. Most people understand this one. But the problem is most people think they cannot cause and they can only be affected. That's where you give away your power because you're not understanding these principles. You can make cause on the world in the same way that you can be affected. And if you don't have the self-esteem to do that yet, what you do to get there is you try to build a strong base. You try to connect with real people that you're in alignment with and try to just even communicate with each other, because in the communication you can define certain truths about reality just by it. There's layers to these things. Just by building a base and having a good group around you, you'll have real solid, think of them like totem poles or pillars in your life that you know that they're going to be there for sure. So you can bounce an idea off them and you can expect a certain response. And when that response that you get back isn't what you expected, well, now you know that you're keying into something that wasn't seen before. And you're unraveling the mysteries of the universe or that conversation or whatever. The final principle is the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. everything has a masculine and feminine principles. That goes for every species and every man, woman, and child. We all embody both masculine and feminine within us. It's in our DNA. It's who we are. So, we'll go on to the next slide. And does anybody want to, well, before I do that, does anybody have anything else they want to say about any of these principles before we move on?
Just reading some of the
go ahead, go
comments.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think just reading some of the comments and relating them back to this slide, and we mentioned it on the last episode, that it can be useful to hold even seemingly contradictory ideas simultaneously in your mind. And that's even discussed in physics in terms of and particle theory. And so to try to pin down the world for efficiency's sake and to say that this is the one truth is a dangerous misstep, in my opinion, because there is this almost incapable to comprehend dynamicism to the universe where what you see is not always what you get. And even once you get something else, it's not permanent. And so to be able to entertain a very wide array and an ever shifting and malleable array of awareness is, in my opinion, knowledge. And I think those steps of natural law, the rule of natural law, is an interesting way of talking about that because we admit all of the, excuse me, the vibratory differences and the fluctuation from one bandwidth to another and back again. And so I spend the totalitarian announcement of truth and to entertain as many different possibilities as I can hold simultaneously, simply because I think that it provides a clearer well of knowledge from which I can. So, no, I really like that slide, man. Those are good topics.
Wales? Muted. All right, we'll wait for Wales. I don't know if he's muted or what. This slide is one of the most important slides in the entire deck. And it's important because if you can understand the roots of words, you can basically decode the entire system. Legal, business, word structures, phonetics, and etymology. Give you an example. Liber, like root of the word liberty, for example. It's a Latin for book, also Latin for free. Well, book and free, when you combine them, that's kind of like knowledge. So liberty is, the root of liberty is knowledge. So if you can have a strong knowledge base, ultimately you can set yourself free. That's why we're doing this. So I have here, words are vibratory complexes that are decoded by the brain as ideas that then are associated by the brain as communication. So what does that mean? As I'm talking to you right now, I'm sending air through my vocal cords. Those vocal cords are then vibrating at a certain frequency of energy. And those frequencies of energy are being transduced down into electrical bits, ones and zeros, which are simply just positive charges or negative charges in a computer somewhere. And then those are being reformatted back into sound waves, which then hit your ears. But the only one that's really communicating with you is yourself, because once those words hit your ears, it's your brain synapses that's decoding the information, and you're perceiving it in your own way. I don't decide how you perceive the information. You decide how you perceive the information. So I can charge something with, like, I can say something positive and uplifting, and you could have a totally negative reaction to it because of how you're perceiving the information. Or I could say something completely neutral, and you could take it totally positive. Like, I could make a super neutral call on price for Hex, and someone could think that that's super like bullish, and someone could say that that's super bearish, and it's all relative. because ultimately communication is only going on, true comprehension is only going on internally inside of the individual. What we're trying to do is make you understand the layers of your mind and the layers of wordplay so that you can also use those to your own benefit, good or evil, because the goal here is to make you polarize one of the natural laws towards being an actor on the world stage positively or negatively, right? So without comprehension, there can be no communication. For example, if you read a book and you're reading through a page and then you find yourself halfway stopping through the page and having to start back at the top, that's because you are autonomously reading the words on the page, but you're not comprehending, or the cogs aren't turning inside of your mind because your frequency is turned down. You have to you have to tune up your frequency to start trying to work to learn for the brainwaves to kick back on so that you can start to comprehend the words on the page again. This is what's happening when you lose focus or lose sight or lose alignment. And this happens to everybody. Everybody falls off the truck from time to time. That's part of why we chose a human life, was because you want to know what it's like to go through the trials and tribulations and have this experience. That's why we're here. So to cast a spell or to spell a word, both are using the word spell, but from two completely different contexts. Same said, spending time and paying attention. Spending time as in going to the counter and you're giving away little time units, or paying attention, you're going to pay with your attention. So what you focus your time and attention on, those are outputs. Those are verbs that are outputs. So like if you're spending your time and attention on things that are not productive, then you cannot expect your life to change or be in alignment. You need to when you're giving away your energy, you need to be able to do it in a way that's reciprocated. Otherwise, you end up drained at the end of the day, working 80-hour work weeks. And I love laborers that can work hard and continue to have energy. It's hard though. And so there's ways to recover. And it's important to know that if you want to make a change in your life, that you're going to have to start spending your time on things that you haven't been. And you need to pay attention to things that maybe you overlooked before. So words carry a charge. Anybody want to comment on this?
I love the word. Go ahead, Orca.
Sorry, it was just making me think about the Shipibo people of Peru, man. They're an indigenous group of shamanistic individuals who literally use sound resonance and spoken word as a form of natural healing. And they've been around for thousands of years. Now we're seeing modern medicine become aware of, or at least give credit to, these practices that they've used for over 2,000 years, where there are particular chosen individuals within their society who will go deep into the Amazonian rainforest, and they will devoid themselves of toxic dietary habits. They will become in tune with their natural selves, and they will provide literal healing that we have observed as able to change the toxicity within the patient's body as well as the inflammation within the patient's body by singing Ikaro songs, which literally reverberate a resonant energy between the shaman and the recipient of the natural healing in ways that don't require the induction of like drugs, like petroleum-based drugs. So it's like woo-woo stuff. Like this is real stuff that humans have been connected to for thousands of years. And though we have lost the way in the colonial world that we live in now, this practice has still been relatively maintained within their own lifestyle in the Amazon rainforest. So the idea that these words have spell casting power or resonant energy effects on the surrounding world, it's very real stuff, and we're beginning to document that in the hard sciences and things of that nature. So I just want to touch on that.
Awesome. GymRat, what do you got to say about that?
I don't know. That was pretty dense. What Cash? I was just about to call you Cash. That
Cash.
Orca said. I was thinking about the whole time. I was just thinking about words, like, you know, and I kept thinking to myself, it's like it's always the guy with the most experience, like that is the best with this word. So I was wondering why you were talking. I was like, how do you get better at interpreting words? It's like you have to kind of be around the block, right? Like you have to have
Context clues. So like if you don't fully understand a topic, like logicians, they don't need to know anything about the argument that's being presented other than that the premises are presented in logical order. So like a logician can listen to an argument, and as long as the premises are logically sound, you don't even need to know what the topic's about, and you can tell whether or not the valid argument is valid or invalid. So it's just like abstracting out
you can almost
language by one layer. Yes.
triangulate it to see
Yes.
like if anything. Because if you're smart enough, like you've seen enough stuff, like a little bit of everything, like you know when someone's bullshitting about a topic because you just always know it's more in depth than they mention. Usually, it just ends up being like it's more in depth, or they're like cutting corners in the conversation, and there would be like you would have to continue to elaborate in order to really get their point across. So I just think words do have so much meaning. Guys like Richard Hart, there's a lot of guys that are very good with their words when they're actually speaking to other humans. You know what I mean? Like I could tell you, Richard could be wrong about something and he could still wreck a pleb.
Correct.
You know what I
I've
mean?
seen it.
Because
I've
the
seen it.
pleb can't win an argument because he hasn't been around the block and he has no confidence in himself and his like frequency. You know what I mean?
100%.
I know some nerds that are right.
Wales destroys people all the time with his energy. Just dismantles them.
Yes.
Wales, are you there, bro? I don't know
Yeah,
if he's
bro, I'm
there.
right.
All right. Sorry, I cut you off on that last slide. I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything about this one. That was about the 7 principles. Because I know you were going to say something, then Orca jumped in.
No, I lost it, bro. I'm sorry,
It's all
but I
good.
lost it.
It's all good.
Yeah,
My bad.
Just making
brother.
sure.
probably
You're
come
good.
back to me. It'll come back to me at some point.
Okay. All right. Anything you want to say about the language spells slide? Before I move
Well, that's everything, isn't it?
on? It's a big one.
When you think about how you
think they lost.
sorry, I'm gonna have to close my window at some point.
Happy 4th, everybody. This is Independence Day for the
Yeah.
mind, baby.
Right.
Yeah. When you think about how some things boomerang to us when we want something or we're searching for something or we're in search of something, right? Along the way, you find certain instances that divert you one way or the other. And that's all determined by your intention and how you see things. And that's all a function of how you think and say, right? Because innately, we are what we think. And this is why it's important to understand the very base thing that we're trying to do here. And that's help you understand that the model of what you think is the world is given to you. And this is why all of the facets of all of these properties are being discussed in such a nuanced fashion. And it's kind of crazy that it all ties into hex because it always has. You guys have always heard me talk about these things, just not in this direct manner. But it's all the same. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to do something that we want to do. And that's the whole
100%.
point.
100%. It's crazy how cryptocurrency finds its place on the world stage because of these principles. It's
Front and
because
center.
there's a constant cry for help. Like everybody in the world that's in pain, that's not in the 1%, is like just wants to have a little less pressure on the back of their neck, and blockchain's doing that for people. I would not want to live in a world without DeFi. Like I'm just telling you that right away. That would suck. This is our only opportunity. So let's not fuck it up.
It's the opportunity. Right? I mean, it's interesting that we're going to be talking about mining, space manufacturing, all these things. And, that was supposed to be the first $1 trillion industry. And it just so happens that it's not. It's going to be crypto. And this was 4 years ago, mind you. This was the narrative 4 years ago surrounding that arena, that industry. But now things have changed a little bit, right? You have a whole nother weapons race, quote unquote, going down. And it's on the chain. So
100, dude.
yeah.
Good points, everybody. So if we bring up this slide, this next slide is just to hammer home a visualization for the effects of frequency and energy on perceived matter. So we talked a little bit how words are spells and they can carry an energy. For example, vitality, the root is vite, like a vitamin, which is a positive charge, which is a healing property. Or fatality, the root being fate all, like the fate of all, which is an equalizing factor, neutral. Or virality, as in a virus with the prefix being vir, which is a shedding quality property, which is it comes with a negative charge. It spreads, right? That's kind of why we use virality, is because it's the spreading or the shedding, but it's actually got a negative charge. But that doesn't mean bad. That just means that negative charge is hopping from one atom to the next, to the next, to the next. So you need to reframe everything in your life that everything is, and that you are just a tool maker. You are just on a path to use these things as tools. They shouldn't affect you emotionally one way or the other, because now you're letting the physical world affect you in ways that you shouldn't. And that could not be any more clear than by looking at these water droplets. So there was a study that was done. I'm sure Rothschild's seen this study done, and many of you other one have probably seen this too. Basically, what this guy did was he studied the effects of intention on water. And so they would, and I actually, GymRat, the other day, didn't you pull up a video on stream from Twitter of a guy sending music at what was that thing called? It was like graphene orb or something. There was a black blob in the middle of it that was shaping itself to the sound of the music, basically dynamically.
Holy smokes! Why? When I was scrolling through Twitter,
You remember that the other day?
dude, that thing was insane. We just
I wish
rolled
I had
by
that
it.
video, but anyway,
I could probably find it.
the point here is the energy you direct at these water molecules makes it crystallize or get these disharmonic patterns. So pattern recognition is ultimately a byproduct of intelligence. So like if you know you're intelligent when you can recognize that this is a geometrically sound pattern, and this is what shape the water made when the dude shot thank you at it for 7 days, arbitrary number of days. Or love and appreciation created this beautiful hexagon structure in this water molecule. Mother Teresa made a hexagon structure in the water molecule. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds on why the hexagon and hex.com and these things are perfectly aligned and in time perfectly. They're perfectly timed. There's a lot of layers to why hex is going to be amazing on top of it already being amazing, right? But here you can see that geometrically the hexagon is a symbol of equidistant balance. And so maybe it might be the best sound money, it probably is. So the point here, what's that?
I was just saying that's funny. I like sound money. I like it in with the like web.
Oh yeah,
word
sound.
spells and stuff.
Right. So
actually,
it really is all tied in, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. My mom gave me his book, Dr. Emoto. It's his name is Masaru Emoto, and he actually passed away in 2014. But the book was called The Hidden Messages in Water. My mom gave that to me when I was like,
awesome.
I don't know. I think I was just starting my first job. Yeah, it's a fascinating book, and the thing that I find interesting is so he ran his experiments. He produced his images that spoke to the crystalline structure of water after it had been exposed to different vibrations and particular words and things. And then there are the people that try to speak against that study and say that it's a bunch of hokey pokey. And that's, for me, I don't try to align with like he's right or they're right. I think it's important to just entertain both sides of that coin because, again, the universe is so dynamic that the manifestation of reality onto the self. You're not required to prescribe your belief system to the thoughts of others. And so entertaining the different possibilities is more powerful than trying to pin down, even in the most like optimistic setting, right? Like, oh, words ultimately control of your life because this word's good and that word's bad. I think that's a weird optimistic prism to build around yourself. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some people can't replicate the study and then some people can replicate the study. I think that the dynamicism of the universe is too. And so it's really fascinating when some people have taken the time to engage in that observation, trying to almost break the, I call it like breaking the universe. I play this game with my friends, some of my closest friends, where you'll be having one of these really high frequency conversations, right? You're having these almost like discovering the aliens and like figuring out what's really going on here. And then like the lights will flicker. And like that's how you score a point in breaking the universe is you have these really fascinating and open-minded conversations and then something bizarre.
Subtle energies.
Yeah, yes. like a counter that's been sitting there for weeks and it's never been disturbed, but you and your buddy are going back.
Or like somebody's calling you and you know exactly, you don't even have to look at your phone, you already know who's trying to get a hold of you. Stuff like that. Like stuff that your intuition knows and is picking up on, but maybe your conscious mind can't process the how. So like most of science.
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your point. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say that, so if life is truly multidimensional and we're trying to define life through the lens of logic and reason, but logic and reason is already a compartmentalized and fragmented view of the mind itself, as in a lens by which through to look as in a tool, then it's already missing the full dimensionality, the full spectrum of energy of all life all over. The cosmos is a very large place. So to try to deduce it down into just the reasoning segment of the human psyche is actually a limiting factor. Science has made for us the most amazing times in technology, but we're nowhere near the ultimate point. And maybe as these things evolve, we'll notice that more revelation will come from elements outside of just simply logic or reason.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to speak to Hiroshi's comment because he talked about the observer effect, which is well described in the double slit experiment, which I recommended in the comments last video, and I'll put a link on.
We do have a slide on that in here as well.
Oh, very cool. And so for me, it also gets, for those of you that don't know, the observer effect is like outcomes can change based on whether or not they're being perceived by a conscious or unconscious observer. And that gets me back to that slide where we had the different line. And then we have these stories throughout human history that describe people that seemingly lived on that line of truth their entire lives. And I was in a philosophy class one time discussing like the positive, the contrapositive, the inverse, the converse, all of these different logical structures of argument. There was this kind of epiphany I had that was the idea of defining something by all the things that it is not. And so an idea might be that, say, like your enlightened soul, right? Like your Buddha is some required piece of an equation where all other individuals, all of us are doing this thing, right? We're doing this wave, and our combined observation leads to the necessitation of an existence where there is somebody who appears to be on that line, possibly not because they truly are, but because the awareness of all the other participants in the system, based on the different unique angles of observation that they are contributing, all align into or culminate into this identification of someone who is caught entirely on the line. Mm-hmm. And so it's not necessarily
also known as consensus.
Consensus, right? So make it blockchain. Like that is the idea is that maybe the individual is not.
Anybody who thinks this isn't about blockchain, it is. Right. It's all about it.
The thing is, it's like it's being able to solve that puzzle by saying like, well, I know that I'm imperfect, but my imperfect observation contributes this. My imperfect observation contributes this. And then we end up with this result where even if we aren't 100% correct, there's so many collisions of almost correct that you are able to begin to outline the undeniable truth, or that that energy that we all.
Very well said. I love it.
I'll be right back.
What do you think, Jim? Right? You look like
once
you're thinking hard.
Once you identify it, it's way easier to replicate. But it's the hard part's identifying all this, and that's why it's always a sticky conversation, because it always ends up being about experience and like, where people are at and what the group you're in, and like again social consensus. But now that we're on blockchain, it's like cuts a lot of the fat out of it, right? Like it's just turned into, it's like a marketing thing. It's a social consensus thing, and it's just all wrapped into basically every part of life.
Yeah.
It's like
shared
it's crazy.
peer-to-peer ideas, shared peer-to-peer money, shared information flows. I'm getting a message here. We good on the connection issue thing? I got a connection issue thing popping up. Am I still here?
Mine looks good.
Okay.
As the connection.
Right.
Yeah, I hear you, bro.
Okay. Maybe we dropped Orca. He'll come back. What was I just saying? We were just talking about. What'd you just say, GymRat? You're talking about.
I was just talking about social consensus and how it all ties together with blockchain and how this cuts a lot out of it.
Yeah, so social, the social consensus idea, we're basically going. So basically, what I said last time was that we're moving toward honest money, peer-to-peer on-chain money, because it's like inevitable. It's not. It's because all the monies we've had up to this point has been manipulated, and we're headed toward a new epoch, right? Where we're going to rely on consensus of what has value, and so that should actually create a more true value proposition in the end, right? Because it's everybody's decision.
Hopefully. I mean, we can't extrapolate the future and the powers that be. At least I can't. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what people are capable of. I don't know what they're willing to do, how far they're willing to go to get their way. I don't know. I'm not saying that it could be way on both sides of the way I'm thinking, if you know what I mean. Like this could be way easier than I think, and it's just going to happen. And the war of the layer one, I mean, the future is just going to be layer one blockchains. You know what I mean? That all connect, and people just choose which one they like the best. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
More fair.
Well said, Jack.
You just said Mike dropped us.
There was a moth that came after me.
Wales is Mike.
I was
bugging on there.
My mic is what?
It's kind of like fuzzy.
All right, let me plug it on.
So,
because it is fuzzy.
While he's doing that, I'm gonna pull up our next slide. I want to get through this part of the slides. So, this is just understanding currency, but from the love economy level, like from the previous slide on how the layers of economy is. This is basically like the spiritual currency is like your familial bonds, your social bonds, and like the decisions that you make every day. And it comes back to those principles from the original part of the slides, where the first expression of natural law is the generative polarity. So what we use to create. Now, the negative manifestation of that would be fear, or just a lack of consciousness or a lack of striving, and that leads to unconsciousness. That unconsciousness, that unknowing, is what leads to fear. And I'm sure you guys have seen that in crypto, where you try to onboard someone you care about into a cryptocurrency that you think is going to make a big move, for example, and their own fear or lack of consciousness on the topic or awareness on the topic, they're unwilling to face that reality, and so then they go into the next level down, which would be like ignorance of that topic or ignorance of that market, which is the refusal of truth, which is just the unwillingness to grow and move forward. Now, conversely, the generative polarity of positive would be like love consciousness, not like romantic love, but more like accepting and allowing. So if new information comes to you, are you willing to accept it neutrally and learn about it? and then formulated an idea of it later? Are you going to allow things to occur so that you can have an unbiased perspective? Or are you going to try to control and manipulate a situation, which would be the converse of love? It'd be the opposite of love. It'd be trying, control and negativity. So what the second layer of initiating expression is how this manifests in the reality is through knowledge and acceptance of truth. So as you go down through these levels, you start unlocking higher levels of existence for yourself from just simply allowing new information to come in and learning from it, synthesizing it, then forming your internal expression of that, which is what happens internally, which is sovereignty or understanding. They call it understanding. Then the external expression of that sovereignty manifests as freedom. So people might see you do really well in crypto, and they see how free you are now, how happy you are. It's because you took you became this accepting, information absorbing consciousness way back years ago, maybe if you got into the crypto markets, and you were just willing to seek new information. So this led all the way to your own freedom, and ultimately,
You also have to be smart enough to understand, like, the other people around you might be wrong about what true freedom is, and that you do know. Like, sometimes I got lost. Like, I feel like my life is all on the positive side now, but like for a while, my life was the same, but I was convinced from everyone around me that I was doing something wrong.
Mhm.
And then, so that's pretty wild. I was just thinking on my feet,
yeah, definitely, dude. You can get bad information. That's what the whole point of discerning truth is. Like those oscillating waves of the brain waves, that's you discerning truth from fact, or from fact from fiction. So like your own guiding principles you might get bad information and you might even act on that information and it might not give you the outcome you wanted. But once you get the outcome you didn't want, now you know what to steer away from the next time. And that's just general practice, or trying and failing and then trying again. And I mean, ultimately, this chain of events leads to order or manifested good. A lot of people think we live in a chaotic universe just of random happenstance, but that spits in the face of a world driven by intent. Like, everybody has intentions, good and evil, and the world is getting better generally, right? That's a product of this intention, right? Yeah, there's pockets of negative that manifest confusion, right? We've seen that all over the mass media for years, but the people are not as responsive to that mass media manipulation as they were 50 years ago, pre-internet. The internet has totally blown the wheels off traditional media sources, so they've kind of lost a lot of their stranglehold on the mental body of a population.
Nobody watches that shit anymore. As many. I mean, like,
No,
percentage. Very, very small.
only a percentage of mostly older people and people at cost cutters getting their hair cut, have it on TV down there or whatever.
And think about it. It went from A to Z in 10 years. Absolutely, from full blown to nothing in 10 years. Crazy.
Yeah. A lot of the growth on the internet happened, yes, in about this 12-year span. Ironically timed with Bitcoin, right, and with the smartphone in 2008. So it's been really fast and really incredible.
Crazy.
So I mean, you guys understand good and evil, right? What manifests from a negative expression of natural law is control and chaos. But like the guys that are on top of that system, on top of that pyramid right now, are losing their strength and their grip every day to new technologies and an open internet, essentially. Although they're trying to close it down, shut people's YouTubes down, stuff like this. But you can't stop the billions of people that are not on that side of the fence. If it's only 1% versus 99%, that's not a very easy battle to win.
Think about it too. If I had a problem with my channel, let's say something like this happened, and now I can just ask 3 people if I can restream their shit in the morning. They'd say, yeah, fuck it. you know, like for, you know, until you got your channel back, like there, we can now form around what they're like. It's almost impossible to extrapolate on like what's possible.
I think too.
Anybody else got anything to add here? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on top of both of those ideas. You know, I think we discuss it like it's this empirical battle of the few versus the many. But if you think about the reality of resonant frequencies and even like several stones dropped in a pond, the interference pattern of the waves or the ripples that are produced ultimately create their own pattern from the outcome of all the contributions. So you might look at the world and say, well, you know, there's so few that are working on this frequency or this wavelength and trying to produce this positivity, and there's all this confused or unenlightened, you know, other side of the fence. But in reality, the mere intersections, incompatible resonances leads to a new pattern of frequency altogether. And so if those who choose to believe that they are producing positive manifestations continue under contradictory forces to produce that same resonance, ultimately the tuning forks align, right? And ultimately you find the symbiotic frequency between. And so maybe it's not a matter of one person convincing one person convincing one person. It could be much more about the intersecting of compatible forces that drives to a greater and more inclusive total resonance.
100% consensus, bro. 100% agree with that. Yeah, because it's not just so black and white, is it?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance, right? The constantly escaping knowledge, right? We think, I like the lyrics from the song "This Too Shall Pass." It says, "We think of ourselves as one whole being, and we claim that it is this thing. We think of ourselves as one whole being, but it sets upon the rule that self-interest is divine, and Cancer too lives by this golden rule that you must do unto the others as the others unto you." And it's this interesting discussion about, you know, we think of cancer as like this evil poison in the body, and then we think about that sort of self-fulfilling enlightenment journey, both going about their growth from the same core concept of doing what's best for the self. And then John Nash, from an economic standpoint, said that maybe it's not about acting within your own self-interest, but accepting that in order to achieve your own self-interest, you must consider the self-interest of all the other players at the table. That opens up the idea of this sort of resonant frequency bouncing off of all of the players in order to produce a bandwidth that's more inclusive to all that are involved. So I think just touching on what you guys were saying, you know, it is there seems to be this core principle that whether you see it as positive or negative, it's awesome. And the outcomes that you observe are probably more a reflection of the fact that you, as an individual, are observing something at all, as opposed to there being this empirical total truth of the goodness or the badness and that's why I like that you said positive and negative doesn't equal good and bad. You said that earlier, that negative, positive, but good and evil are concepts of ethics, right? And positive and negative are concepts of energy, and they don't
Correct.
necessarily have to be one and the same.
Yeah, a lot of people get that wrong, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. Yep. So let's get into part 4, manifest. So why are we talking about all these energies, all this time and currency and all these things, spiritual currency and sound money, and where do they intersect? And I think this part of the conversation was originally sprung from an idea actually between Orca and I on Twitter. We were talking about energy and nuclear, and we were talking about boomers and how boomers really want to put their money in somewhere safe and store it away and forget about it, but just be safe. Like, and you know, they're using this 3,000 plus year old ideology that precious metals might be like a safe inflation hedge against a rapidly debasing currency, for example. But what they miss in this is all of the tremendous change that is occurring on the technological level and from a physics on an understanding of the physics of what's driving the change at a atomics at a subatomic level. Because like we can think that our thoughts are our own, but essentially they're only a product of your environment because you are not your thoughts. You are only your thoughts insofar as you make them your that what you define yourself, your identity as. So let's go into some of this cool new technology and like give you guys like a positive outlook and an understanding. Everybody knows that the world's getting vaporized. All industry is getting vaporized by software. Everything's being made simpler, less friction, less middlemen, or the middlemen are making it super cheap and efficient to bring it to your front door, or or we're commoditizing the economy. Like somebody can hop in their own vehicle and drive around people for compensation in the form of Uber. Or education isn't happening just in a classroom anymore, it's happening on YouTube. This is the end of middlemen. This is the vaporizing industries, right? This is software taking over, and it's just a transition phase to get us to that next huge quantum leap in technology. So this slide is just a bunch of just cool. I just went online and I looked up some cool technology or some cool new ways of looking at what technology could mean. Because like a lot of times people think technology, they think silicon based chips, they think it's computers, right? But technology is language, it's words, it's energy, it's new fibers, new products. Like it's fire is even technology, right? Pre-fire, that was cool technology, right? You had the freaking fire stick. You were you were the chieftain of the tribe. Um, and so humans' relationship to technology is constantly changing and evolving. And I think we need to remember that if you think we're at the ultimate climax of technology, I think you've been misled. And this is just a simple example, a couple simple examples here of some of that stuff. So this company here created this micro silk fiber, and I'll read through what it is. So they studied silk proteins spun by spiders to determine what gives those fibers their incredible properties. Then they went and they modified E. coli bacteria. So what they say is we develop proteins inspired by these natural silks by using bioengineering to put specific genes into yeast. So then the waste that the yeast produces is a protein in large quantities, and they do it through fermentation using yeast, sugar, and water. So they're growing fiber, right? That's crazy. They isolate and purify the silk protein and then spin it into fibers, and now it's similar to those like rayon and acrylic. And they knit these fibers into fabrics and garments. So they're effectively getting spider silk, but it's bioengineered by using bacteria, right? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I
And then
mean,
down here below, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say I can speak to that a little bit because back in 2011, I was invited to a private seminar. The two highest ranking math and science scores on the standardized test from each state in the United States were given a free trip to listen to Dr. Robert Hariri speak on genomics and epigenetics. And during those discussions, we covered everything from stem cell technology to gene expression to gene splicing. And we uh, we had one male and one female from each state selected to go. So myself and my friend D, we got to go. And during the discussion, they said that the things that we would learn about during that seminar wouldn't be published in textbooks for another uh, 10 to 14 years. So that was 2011. We're now in 2022, so that's 11 window. And this stuff is becoming like more mainstream now. But in that seminar, we spoke about the ability to take a particular, I can't remember the species of spider, but I can Google it after the show, and to bioengineer the silk producing and be able to splice those genes with the goat producing or the milk producing genes of a particular species of goat to the point where instead of milk production, the goat would produce effectively this spiderweb fiber. And they talked about the durability, density, and textile strength of this new produced spiderweb, where if you were to produce it in the density and the size of a pencil, number 2 pencil, you'd be able to use a slingshot and shoot it through an armored tank. The strength is something in the X's in terms of textile strength to that of steel beams, and yet it's more flexible than a piece of paper. And we looked at all of this incredible science as a form of sort of bioengineering the ability to express the genomic sequence within us to the point where, like a cure for cancer, rather than it being using all these chemicals and stuff, we can get to the point eventually where we will just turn off the genomic expression for producing cancer, and the cancer will just simply stop because the body is designed to its RNA and mRNA sequences. And if you were able to essentially just take the gene and tell it, hey, don't express in such a way that you produce cancer cells, then you wouldn't have that issue anymore. So it's a really, I'm glad that I didn't know that you had that in the slide about the utilization of animal genes and
Yeah, dude,
proteins.
and I didn't know that you knew all that about it. That's perfect complimentary content there. I appreciate that. That's awesome, dude. Thank you.
Is this mushroom that you're about to talk about the mushrooms that can eat plastic?
No, this is just leather, mushroom-based leather
Okay.
textile. But that's cool
I
too.
was just gonna. I'll let you touch on that, talking about a particular evolution that was related to plastic, and I just thought that it's interesting. Like the Jurassic Park quote, "Life finds a way." We've discovered a particular species of mushrooms that actually digest plastics, and they do it very slowly. And so people are like, "Oh, well, it's not an effective putting them in a landfill and letting them gobble up all of the plastic that'll take thousands of years to, naturally decay." But the idea isn't that human life finds a way. The idea is that life finds a way. And so on a human time frame, it might be like, well, that's not a viable Gaia perspective, like the Mother Earth perspective. There's a much longer timeline there, and so all of those landfills belong to us, in the words of the mushrooms.
I like that. GymRat?
I'm gonna let you guys just go to the next.
All right.
Slide. I'm just reading the chat for a second.
For sure. So let me just touch on a couple other cool technologies on this slide. I must preface this. See this shoe down here, you guys? It's a silver stitched grounded footwear. So the premise here is that we're all bioelectrical beings. Our heart emits a pulse, which is electrical signals, and your brain functions mostly on the harmonic sequences of electrical signals and brain waves.
DM to come into his Twitter space.
And these shoes are trying to ground you. Basically, it's footwear that can use silver to basically ground you back to the earth while still wearing shoes. So like ultimately, the planet is a giant battery, and if you aren't touching your feet to the earth like daily or frequently enough, the radio, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all these wireless signals are like phasing in and out of your biophysiology, and they can create free radical damage in your body. So like what you need to do is you need to ground your feet to the earth so that the earth can pull the negative charge through your system through the earth. And like we never had a lot of these issues in the past because we were more connected to nature. But what this shoe is trying to do is connect us back to nature, but still give us some footwear to wear. So it's fascinating, like the angle of how we define technology and what that can mean in 100 years. If this is the beginning of a 100-year exponential curve, can you imagine how far technology can go? I mean, we're even talking about robot bees. If I'm sure that we can be a little bit more creative about how to keep the living bee species alive. But it's good to know we have a fallback plan, right?
So Richard just invited Crypto Curricula to a Twitter space.
Did he?
Yes.
Okay. Is he gonna stay live here? Is he doing dual? What is he doing?
It's ultimately up to
Okay.
me yesterday saying that we should do a Twitter space, and now, I'm caught between two worlds.
Well, dude, I'll leave that decision up to you. Ultimately, I feel like he probably if he's calling on you, he probably needs you for something.
He might just be trying to make me aware of it. But I'll tell you what, 5 minute sabbatical, and I go pop in, and if it turns
Yeah.
out that I'm not doing anything productive in there, I'll just
I'm
be right.
still going through the technology slides anyway, so when you might want to come back for the end.
You bet. I will keep myself in the restream. I'll just nuke my audio and video, and then I will come back in.
Yeah, just hop in and out
Quick,
as
okay.
you see fit. High bandwidth energy. Yep. So this next slide here, we're talking about computer memory, and there's a group of scientists in Japan that found a way to take diamond wafers and store data in a quantum way in the imperfections of the diamonds. Now they can grow these diamonds in a lab for like almost no cost, fractions of the cost, and effectively what these little diamond wafers do is they can store 25 million terabytes or 25 billion gigabytes of data. So to put that into perspective, like your typical um, memory right now is like somewhere between 1 and 4 terabytes of memory on RAM. So just to think about how that resistance might try to prevent something like this from coming out, because that would literally spit in the face of a multi-billion-dollar computer industry. Like if this thing, there's a lot of other technologies that have to come out to use this in a productive way, because you need to also advance other layers of computing. But just the fact that this exists is like a solid step forward towards a quantum computing world. I made the comment here that most boomers are completely missing the scale of change happening on the most cutting edge technology and how far this is going to go. Because once you don't have to keep going to the store to buy new computer parts every 5 years, and you can do a one-time purchase, and that computer can last you 20 or 30 years. It reduces stressors on the supply chain. It decreases friction. It completely changes the amount of data that we can transmit between each other and can allow for like extremely high fidelity and other things. So it's good to keep in mind like the level of change that can happen and how fast it can happen. Now this stuff already exists. So it's just a matter of getting it mass produced and out. Here's some healing technology. So to touch on what I did earlier when we looked at the modified shoe footwear. Humans are electromagnetic creatures. We run on electricity. The Earth is basically a giant battery. When you make contact with the Earth, you take the bad free radicals out, force them through the Earth's electromagnetic field. Free radicals are cells that are out of control, and they create a chain reaction of getting other cells out of control. So the symptoms of this is, if you're not being grounded in nature, the symptoms of this are inflammation and swelling, which is a root cause of most disease. So what these technologies do, this Tesla one, it shoots a low frequency band at your tissues, and it kills off old dead tissues, old dead cells, and revitalizes and regenerates new cells with this infrared beam. So you're going straight to the energy level to heal instead of using chemicals, which chemicals are just one step away. That's compounds that are charged. This is literal charged energy. So it's like less friction, less chaotic stuff going on in your system. And instead of curing the symptoms, you're just treating the symptoms with chemicals. This is kind of the opposite. It's just trying to take care of it in right with an energy wave. And then in the middle here, we got a grounding technology. It's an earthing towel. It's made of silver nanoparticles. It's like very similar to the shoe we showed. Basically just like a blanket you lay on, and it grounds you because it connects to your grounding port on your outlet. There's no power, obviously. It's strictly meant to ground you. And then over here we have this Tesla plasma medbed chamber technology. It's just another way to attack any kind of distortions or problems you're having with your body by attuning this to the proper frequency to solve a certain problem. And there's certain harmonic frequencies that this can be dialed into to solve certain issues. For example, like a thyroid problem would be at a certain frequency of hertz. So you can actually check this stuff out on youtube.com/c/medbeds and anti-aging medical products. So if you want to look up medbeds and anti-aging medical products and you have people in your life that are suffering, maybe you need to take a look at this new holistic version of technology. If nothing else is working, maybe try this. You know, we'll talk about nutrition and we'll talk a little bit about different biohacking too. And I actually asked GymRat and Sam a lot of questions about this, because if you can understand your body chemistry, ultimately you can make your body work for you instead of you working for your body. So on the top, on the left, I have just a simple it's basically how ATP works in your body. It's basically how you get energy. It's by the flow of potassium in and out of a cell and sodium in and out of a cell, which creates the flow of nutrients in and out. It's like your energy pump on a cellular level. So if your potassium levels are good and your sodium levels are good and you're replacing them as they get sweat out of you, it will solve a lot of these if you're having like brain fog, slow reflexes, tingling, numbness, abnormal heart rhythm. Fix your potassium levels. Get your blood work done. Learn about what your body is. Like, if you don't know any of this stuff and you're just getting started, don't be overwhelmed. Start doing some searches on YouTube, or start watching GymRat and Sam talk about this stuff, because you need to understand this stuff to live your best life. It's important. It's not worth being ignorant on, or you'll end up in a negative loop. So some biohacking plus supplementation is supplementation and supreme nutrient dense food sources is like the easiest way to get your energy sources back. Take vitamins, eat a lot of like healthy foods. I'm not one of those people that subscribes to like only a plant-based diet or only an animal-based diet. I think, as with all things in life, good balance is necessary and required for optimal health. So, like, just to give you guys ideas, all this is doing is giving you guys ideas of like different techniques you can use. Like, temperature training would be like if you want to train your system to produce more testosterone, if you ice bath, your testosterone levels will increase. Or like when you're weight training, if you want to build muscle, doing different forms of muscle confusion, which is basically a fancy way of saying that is reverse periodization. It's basically using different types of work to challenge the muscle constantly to make it grow and promote growth hormone from entering the cells and growing your body bigger, faster, basically. Some other things is hormone replacement therapy. But the most interesting thing to me right now is actually peptides, because peptides are just pulled out sequenced proteins, which are just amino acids, which your body's made up primarily of these. And let's say you have a sleeping or disorder. Well, DSIP, deep sleep inducing peptides, might help solve that by reintroducing those specific branch chain amino acids into your system. Another cool one that actually Sam told me about was called semaglutide. It's a fat reduction one. If for people that struggle with blood sugar and other health issues that are related to obesity or blood sugar levels, because they're intimately tied together, this agonist GLP-1 amino acid slightly increases insulin sensitivity, which is good because a lot of overweight people struggle from insulin. Their insulin sensitivity isn't right. So like their body isn't able to receive the insulin, but your pancreas keeps producing so much more insulin. And you need insulin to live. So what this peptide does is it makes you more sensitive to insulin, so then your body stops overproducing, and it decreases your blood sugar, and it decreases your appetite. So there's a lot of like interesting, simple new solutions to these problems that you can actually self-administer and you can get online. I don't know if GymRat wants to weigh in on some of this stuff.
Well, it's just about the educational piece. Like, it takes so long to get to the point where you can intimately understand your body and get through the information that's given to you that's all wrong.
Mhm.
You know, it takes almost a lifetime if you're doing it like a normal person. Obviously, some of us take the lead and kind of learn some of this stuff for ourselves, and whether that be risky or not, you know. I learned about all this stuff from trial and error, but it's just the learning curve is steep. So it's basically like you need to start somewhere, like that's something personal to you where you're like lacking, whether that be a part of your body that's injured, or and start doing real research on it. Don't just do the prescripted thing, you know, like do some real research. Figure out what's actually going on and figure out what you could actually do to alleviate some of those symptoms in a way where there's a low risk profile. And they just don't tell you that stuff. They don't tell you about frequency and dosage. It's just ridiculous to me. Like they don't give you any proper information, like even on the basics.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't learn about this stuff in your health class. I didn't.
You can't. They won't let you. It's not proper. It's not marketable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a healthy society is probably not profitable for an industry like that. So the healthcare industry, like we said in our last show, right? But not
Yeah.
to get too spun up on a loop on that, because we are in the information age, so we can solve these problems now by
Yep.
ourselves.
I think that's the moral of the story. Like guys, you can solve these problems. I solved a lot of my problems, and it wasn't as hard once I figured out that I had to dive through some info and just get a little more experience.
Mhm. Oh yeah, it's not an easy study, and yeah, we'll do more in the future on, especially on Stam's channel and GymRat's channel, to try to break this stuff down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So here's just a slide on nutrition. I don't want to dig too deep into this. Screenshot this slide if you are having health issues, and then dig into what these, to how to use these fruits, vegetables, herbal teas, and stuff to solve some of your problems. This is just up here so you know, have a good base to go off of. Like I said earlier, I don't believe in a strictly vegan diet. I don't believe in a strictly carnivore diet. I believe in a balanced nutrition. Eat for function. Eat for form and function. If you're eating for fun, it, you're not doing it right. It's fun to eat for fun if you can have self-restraint. But a lot of times, I know with myself, I overeat and it causes health problems, you know, slowly at first and then it expands.
I think rituals are really important with nutrition. Like the rituals that I do in my day come very, like how good I am with those generally align almost proportionally equal to like how good my nutrition is. Like it's just how it works. Like the tighter you are, the more you'll care, and it just doubles back on itself, and you can be a more effective, efficient, and more energetic person.
100%. You will get more energy from utilizing these. 100%. Okay, we got a couple more slides on technology, and I'm going to challenge your guys' worldview a little bit in the next slide. So there's all kinds of cool transportation technology being developed or is developed already. And I'll give you examples. These guys from Grav Labs created a literal jetpack that you can drive around for like 400 grand. You can buy one of these packs. The pack on the back, and there's two hand packs. How cool is that? That was like science fiction when I was a kid. Like that was never gonna happen. And here it is. And then you got this car. Oh, did you want to say something?
No, you're good. You're good.
And then you have this car that these wheels, they can go angular, so like they don't just go front and back, like, and it's totally challenging the status quo for what a vehicle on four wheels could be. And then you have manned drones. Like seriously, this thing goes like 80 kilometers an hour and hovers off the ground. It goes way high. It doesn't just hover, it can fly. It's amazing, right? And then you have, of course, you have SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic. They're all trying to, there's this huge space race going on. Everybody's trying to get to space for commercial manufacturing and for all these different ulterior motives, you know, Mars, going to Mars is a good marketing scheme, but there's a lot of profitable industries that can be developed off this technology, and we'll get into that a little bit here. Electromagnetic bullet trains or electromagnetic elevators that takes us to space. Like this could be a reality before the end of our lives. And then lastly, I wanted to bring up the physics behind the Bob Lazar, 1989 UFO and how the physics of that works. And then just the potential here, I have this guy in the middle because there's a potential here that as our understandings of the reality changes, that our actual reality will shift and change to the point where our frequency is so high and our technology is so advanced, hundreds or thousands of years out, that we will be able to potentially biolocate, like move bodies through time or bodies through space, even though the guys on this panel don't necessarily know the physics behind all that to granular detail. I'm going to try to explain to you a new version of physics as best as I can. And it's called gravity well projection. And the way that this works is there's basically 3 generators in the bottom of this ship, and they create this. They filter this electromagnetic energy through a column in the middle, and inside there's a reactor that's their energy source, and then it goes to the peak here, and then there's a focalized triangulated projection of this gravity well. And what this gravity well is it's fixed, so it's sitting out maybe like 3 or 4 feet in front of the craft, but what it's doing is it's making the craft fall into this gravity well. So you're not getting propelled forward through space, but it's the inverse of that. So it's actually dragging you forward because it's fixed, so it stays out here at a certain level. And because it's basically there's a little eyeball on top of here that can direct the gravity well. And as it shifts location, the craft will fall forward into that new direction. And then this has like it totally alters at the rate of speed at which you can move through space. And this is something that Bob Lazar goes into detail about from his times at I think he was at S4 as a base in New Mexico when he was working on this back in the '89. So if they had this kind of stuff in '89, you got to wonder, how much the deepest and farthest how far does the consciousness expand on our understanding of physics that's not being taught in schools, or it's not being publicly displayed online, right? So I don't know, Wales, if you want to jump in here a little bit and talk about your perspective on space manufacturing, 3D printing, and the markets. You muted. Essentially, the in-space manufacturing, it's kind of like Elon and Tesla, or I'm sorry, Elon and SpaceX makes this big point to that we want to go to Mars, we want to like terraform new planets, and those are like good long-term goals, but short-term, they're going to have to find capital and resources somewhere. So like the thinking here is that you'll send rockets into space and then and then hold them in space, and then the Earth will shift below it, and then you'll re-land, in a fraction of the time, for example. So it's like a new form of transport. But not only that, as these technologies come online and they're more available and the infrastructure is put into place, you could actually start manufacturing goods. The real space race is manufacturing goods in a frictionless environment in space with 3D printers and self-replicating AI that can create different forms of, let's use solar panels as an example of a really rudimentary technology that, that these little robots could just continue to produce their own energy source. They could produce goods and services for people, and then to produce those in space where there's no gravity, there's no friction, would be a fraction of the cost because the energy input would be lower. And so essentially that this is heading towards we're going to be a spacefaring civilization one way or the other. And it's good to know that it's just good to keep in mind like all the levels and layers that are in play right now and potential market opportunities that you might have by investing in these things early, because there are going to be tremendous amounts of capital poured into the great space race of the next 100 years, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's something that Sam actually talks a lot about. Like I'm not gonna. We can move on from it because I really don't have much insight on it, but it's just an interesting concept. Like the future, like we were saying earlier, how we couldn't extrapolate what the cell phone would do for everything. Like it's just a small jump, really.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. All right, so this part of the presentation is probably the most important part. It's going to break down the different frameworks for understanding your mind and understanding energy, and how that affects us. So the premise here is with this slide is that the law of one, it's applying the law of one, or like the idea of the universe as an absolute entity, and it applies it to the physical universe. And Wales will be right here. He's just refreshing. And he'll probably want to speak on the space race thing too. But before we get to that, the law of one applied to the physical universe can be said by this: the cosmos is 100% fully interconnected by the combined forces of all the existing heavenly bodies acting on each other in the same way that your body is dependent on each anatomical subsystem to survive. So that if you were to take one planet and just delete it out of the entire solar system, for example, it would completely reshift all of the dynamics of the electromagnetics of our solar system and beyond, because everything is gravitationally interlocked as in some sort of large cosmic calendar. You back, Wells? This will become very clear as I progress through why this is important. One second, we're having trouble with Wales' audio. He's trying to get in here. Bullish, are you there? Got any idea what's going on over there, Tim? Wales, maybe try a different mic or something. So I'm moving through this pretty quick here, but this is basically the point of this slide is to, in the same way that the previous slide was trying to connect the dots between your human system and how it's tied to the Earth, and that the Earth is intimately tied to the sun and the other planets. It's trying to create for you a framework by which you can have a generally just have a general perspective on the universe as a unified whole system, right? So, but that's important because if you can come at knowledge from that angle, then you can start to defragment all the information that comes at you, because you can base it from a very holistic perspective, just the same as you do with your nutrition or science. You want to create the most whole view you can of these things, right? So like when you look at the Milky Way galaxy through different radio wavelengths, like we only see the Milky Way galaxy as a visible from the visible light spectrum. Bullish, if you're there, add Wales in here. Radio frequencies, look at this. This is crazy. Like you're seeing the same picture, but you're seeing it from different. Our electronics are showing us a different picture of the same galaxy, right? This is because like all of these frequencies of energy are happening in a layered way, right? So like that, just because maybe in your daily life you might not have all interactions of Earth in your mind's eye, and you can't like be ultimately aware of everything, you can still have an absolute understanding that everything is a whole system, right? You can understand simply that everything is intimately connected indefinitely forever, and just how it is, because that's the paradox of the space-time continuum, is that it's one whole system. And we're all tied into it. Like you can't get out of it. We're all tied into the same system. But all these, even though you may only experience the visible light spectrum, for example, it doesn't mean that these other dimensions to life aren't existing at the same time. And that's the point of this slide. Get you to start thinking that there are ulterior dimensions to life. And to really hammer that home, I wanted to bring up the triple universe model. And what the triple universe model is, it refers to areas of perception and judgment that motivate human behavior. So you can basically break your life down into 3 universes, or 3 layers of one universe. So you get like the phenomenal universe, which is like your living 5 senses experience every day, like macro physics, biological, microphysics, psychophysics. These are all phenomenal phenomena, meaning they're manifest physically, meaning as you're living your life, you're experiencing life as a child through your 5 senses mainly. You don't maybe not have these other 2 universes or faculties fully in alignment or fully understood. And you're not even going to understand the phenomenal universe in its entirety. Just as like if an athlete is going to become a great athlete at something, they don't spawn day one with the ability to catch a touchdown upside down one hand and in the air. Like that's a skill that's developed by interacting with the world, and that's the phenomenal world. But it is through their use of the imaginal universe by vision and seeing forward, seeing through time, that you're able to manifest that for yourself by visualizing, let's say an athlete, football player, for example, by visualizing catching that game-winning touchdown, or by doing intense workouts and visualizing yourself physically getting bigger, stronger, and faster, or by visualizing yourself acing an exam. By using the imaginal universe, you're dreaming and you're using altered states of consciousness that exist in the other dimensions to pull into the phenomenal realm, which is the manifest universe, the life you want. And that is always dynamic and changing, and you have to rely on the consensus reality of everybody else too to reflect that back to you. So it's a give and a take. I'm trying to also read the chats here as well while I'm talking, but it's a lot to handle here. So so not only are we living in a phenomenal reality of manifest biological, physical interactions and technology, but you're also living in this imaginal dream realm where we make our dream lives real. We only have our human perspective to base things off of, but we all have dreams and ambitions, and this is all created in the mind's eye. It's created by planning, essentially. Planning is trying to get from point A to point Z, in a lot of cases as fast as you can. And the stronger vision you can hold and more consistency you can have with that vision, the faster you get your results, and you will manifest for yourself a living dream world. And I think this applies to cryptocurrency and investments, because if you're doing your due diligence, your research, it's palpable, the taste of where this goes, of for example, with Hex, if you're staked and you understand the T-share system and how that works and how sound money works, you're not sweating one bit right now in this bear market, because you have the vision, you can see the outcome, because you see the interest payments that you've been getting paid for 2 years, and you understand the system as immutable code fundamentally better than 99% of people. So you know that you can basically say that, as with all over leveraged bear market cycle, like these things come to an end because everybody makes money in a bull market, and the money printer always gets turned back on. So which brings us to like the third universe, which is the moral universe. This is like where your decisions are made from. So earlier it was defined as your decisions that you make by quote unquote divine will, or your positive or negative charge in your life, how you want to be. That's the moral universe. That's the planet of intention. That's us basically creating a consensus reality that's it's a timing frequency that's driven by intention and not by random chaos, right? Because everything in society is structured and planned, right? By good or evil, right? So it's not necessarily about one or the other. It's more about the whole system of, ethics and moral conduct leads to being in a universe driven by intention. And ultimately, where this lands is creating a planet more and more of beauty, essentially. Our aesthetic values, our stages of spiritual awakening, our spiritual values, these are the things that are not tangible physically in the phenomenal realm, but you feel them energetically. Like when you do a good deed for somebody, you get a nice charge from that. When you do something really bad and you don't feel good about it, or maybe you do feel good from it, at least you're getting the right feedback, right, from the moral universe into the physical universe. So by acting on this triangle, this prism of moral universe, imaginal universe, phenomenal universe, you have a human life. So you are existing in 3 simultaneous universes, ultimately with the goal of just staying in alignment, and just the ultimate goal is to not end up being a sloppy person that doesn't align one way or the other, because ultimately that's a very unfulfilling and sad existence, and that's not the goal here. If you're here today, you already know about cryptocurrency, you already way ahead of the game. So financially, you're going to be sound. It's just a matter of continuing to heal the body and the mind and the soul and move it in an aligned direction forward. So you feel fulfilled and you can create the world you want to live in. So just to finish out, I'll recap this slide. This model demonstrates how humans are not always moving through an outer and inner realm, but that a third realm, which is the moral universe, is continuously informing our decisions and perceptions in a tangible and real way that affects the phenomenal life, right? Your living physical life. I don't know if anybody wants to add in here, but
I'm just listening. You're doing a great job.
all right. I don't know if you can get a hold of getting Wales back in here. He needs to be added back in. I don't know what happened to Bullish.
I'm not sure what happened to him. I'll
All right.
text him.
Okay. So here we go. What's actually happening right now? Well, individuals are always going through this growth cycle of you're born into the world and you have to learn how to survive. And what that means for people is financial well-being, physical and mental health. Right? So if you don't have this very foundation at your core, it's going to be very hard to do a lot of these other to build on that. Like if there's no strong foundation or structure, it's going to be very, very hard for you. So it's good to just start small, work on your relationships, get close with your family, build friendships. Make sure that you're trying to live from a space of open communication. And then as you find the stability, as you're being raised up and you find the stability and these relationships are starting to make sense and there's going to be more and more increasing connection, you'll find that you'll feel better, you'll be able to be in your best element, you'll have security, productivity, you'll be more efficient in life. And that's great. And that gets you to a point where you can have a very, very successful career, or you can be a very successful athlete, or you can be a successful guy in markets. But ultimately, the goal is to reach this transformative stage where you excel, you become autonomous, you don't rely as much on other people for stability, now you become autonomous and you become accountable in your own way and are able to give back to society a little more. This happens through this transformative process. This is where courage is born, responsibility, and this is ultimately where the beginnings of innovation start, is by the transformative power of the fourth level. So then with to move forward, then you start self-expressing and finding meaning and purpose in life. And this is what we've been basically harping on the whole time, which is, if you're going to get rich with cryptocurrency, for example, what good is it without meaning and purpose and having some sort of direction to go with all that wealth, right? And for anyone, it's their own decision what to do. It's their life ultimately. But what is just common wisdom is that you need to find a path, and you need to try to stay in line with your own highest potential and your highest truth. And that also ultimately brings forth authenticity, integrity. Integrity is a key one. Who talks about integrity a lot? Whales Only talks about that all the time. How important that is. It's your inner alignment, it's your purpose, it's creativity, it's clarity, and it's transparency. So it's like it's not living from a fear-based perspective. It's being able to be open and clear about things and upfront, right? As you move through these levels, you get to the sixth level, which is connection. And this is like not talking connection on like a one-to-one familial level, more on like a societal level, where society starts to recognize you as a force in the society, right? That can make tremendous change by adopting these, by basically mastering these other levels. And so then when these titans come together and they collaborate and they have empathy and they have environmental awareness about the planet, about our situation, and they're working towards solutions to problems, that builds a stronger and stronger connection between like minds, which creates whole new paradigms, right? That's all of the new technology, all of the new solutions. This comes from being more and more connected. That's how that technological curve that I showed in the last stream plays out, is that humanity just becomes more and more connected. And the internet's an obvious example of that, right? The seventh level is contribution, and that's totally giving selfless service back to the society that helped you get there. It's a certain sense of social responsibility, right? It's a long-term perspective, and like a lot of hexagons in particular comes with this long-term perspective. And a lot of hexagons are compassionate, right? And I don't think it's a coincidence that we found this technology earlier as an IQ EQ test, and we're basically trying to explain to the world why long-term is so important, and especially when it's on-chain trading, right? On a totally on-chain asset, and the importance of honest money, sound money. Very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. So I wish I had Orca here for this part, because he had mentioned earlier in the slides about the double slit experiment and
Oh yeah.
and these interference patterns. So if I'll start with this. If
Say less, fam.
there he is. Let's go.
Orca.
Well, I'll let you take it
I
away.
didn't listen to like 7 different conversations at the same time.
What was that? What was going on over there? I obviously was missing it, and I was sad.
Richard hopped into a space with like a guy who's really into Dogecoin or whatever, but it's just really good engagement. Like he's educating a lot of people on crypto, dropping
Sure.
bombs, and just really providing some quality content to a space that is probably more about like just memes and hanging out. So it's just cool, man. It's good for the whole crypto space.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna go listen to that after this. Cool. But
You
if
bet.
you want to take this away, go ahead and talk on the double slit experiment and interference patterns.
Sure. So the double slit experiment was done utilizing subatomic particles that were fired through a particle accelerator one at a time with a either gold or lead sheet that had this singular subatomic particles are shooting through the slit, and they should only be able to hit a backdrop. Or yeah, the backdrop is made of gold, which can absorb the particles. The backdrop should show a pattern similar to the slit that the particles are shooting through. And they ran this experiment and got results. They then used and they shot particles through it, and they got results that looked like a distribution model with different focal points of intensity. But as they ran the experiment the first time without utilizing any like technology process, the particles behaved in the way that you would expect waves to behave. So the particles went through these two slits, and like that picture in the bottom right, they actually kind of spread out in all these different directions, hitting those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kind of focal fields. But piece of technology in the room to observe the process, the particles began behaving as particles and only going through the slit in a single column, or in a dual column in the case of the double slit. And they ran this experiment thousands of times, right? And the conclusion was that the mere of observing the experiment changed the conclusory outcome of the experiment itself. And these particles, right, they're not, supposedly like living sentient beings. So the question that is begged is, how is it that they behave one way in a certain context and a different way in another context? And so it speaks to something maybe beyond that of this traditional primitive science approach, the non-quantum science, the macro level science, where we expect the law of entropy to be a guarantee, when in fact it's a probability outcome. High energies tend to dissolve into low energy, but it's not necessarily the case. And at the ultimate microscopic level, the quantum level, sometimes it isn't the case. Sometimes things that are hot rather than cool down actually get hotter. And the real outcome is just that the world is stranger than fiction. And so with the double slit experiment, it really does bring back that concept of like a holographic universe. And to Crypto Journeyman's comment, he said intent. That is probably the spiritual surmise that our observation or our input is in fact an ingredient that is considered within the equation of the inevitable outcomes. And there are robins, especially from the UK, that we have observed that rather than use magnetism as the means to traverse the earth, we have found evidence to utilizing a form of sight that is so much more than the cones and rods that we humans use, and that they are rather observing the entire old wave of probabilistic outcomes and then aligning themselves with the outcomes that are within their best interest, given the information that they have in the present. And that then collapses the wave of potentiality and creates a particle path or a singular path to commit their flight to. And so we have all of this evidence from different ranges of scientific study that suggest the reality that we live in is kind of like that Schrodinger's cat, right? The cat, you have a cat in a box. Is the cat alive or dead at any given time? The cat's in a box. If it drinks the poison, it'll be dead. If it doesn't, it'll be alive. While it's under the box with the poison, you have no idea of knowing whether or not it's alive or dead. And in reality, it is said to be both statuses simultaneously. It's the act of observing that then creates the finite outcome. And so when you talk about quantum entanglement, there's this idea, and we spoke about it on episode 1, even though we're probably hundreds of miles away from each other, my skin touches the subatomic particles in the air, which touch the subatomic particles near them. These things are all fluid. They're all moving at hyper light speed when you get to the, but at the end of the day, we're all touching that same fabric. And so it could be said that it is our limited faculties of human perception that confuse us or convince us into seeing the world as this solid state of mass and matter moving about and experiencing things. So when is the Earth a globe? Is the Earth flat? The most brilliant quantum scientists would say, well, of course it's both, and it's both a solid state and a neutral state and a liquid state and a gaseous state and an ethereal state. It's all of these things, because only once we begin to observe it, the empirical evidence that we are communicating to one another. The other fascinating thing is when you look at quarks, which are some of the smallest building blocks of subatomic particles, they are produced in pairs, and they are said to have what we call spin, a quantum spin. And if one spins up, one spins left, the other spins right. They're this dualistic reality, and we measure one at any given time. Before they're measured, the spin could be any direction, but as soon as it's measured, we can then observe in the pair particle the opposite spin. And so there's this somehow being communicated between these two different particles faster than the speed of light, truly instantaneous, because no matter the distance that they are separated, the observation of one measurement dictates the necessary dualistic outcome of the other. So the real higher level, well, they're actually not two different particles. Our limited human faculty perceives these to be two separate things, but it's just one status building block, and we condense for our convenience them to be particles, but they also exist within a wave of potentiality. And that wave of potentiality is what necessitates, measured in one way, the other is measured the opposite. And so even if you could separate these particles thousands of light years apart and observe one, someone else could observe the other, you still can't communicate with your fellow scientists faster than the speed of light. And so it doesn't break the laws of relativity, of general relativity. It's actually just a interesting component to observing reality through the lens that things are not set in stone. And the wave of potentiality is in flux constantly. And it is the observation and the intention of the energy input into the system that necessitates that we can draw therein. So it's like when people start to get in these black and white conversations or arguments, these binary and Boolean conversations, it's such a myopic viewpoint with regard to the evidence that we have to substantiate that there is actually this high complexity to input ourselves into. Remember when I was speaking about that philosophy class and defining something by all the things that it is not, we utilize our limited ability of perception in order to quantify things that are in quantum flux constantly. They are up and down. They are and cold, but we have to observe them and input our actual conscious measurements in order to make those claims. But in reality, the wave of potentiality doesn't care. It is all of those things at the same time.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. What a good summary. Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy because if you really comprehend what he's trying to say, he's basically saying that you are literally existing in two states at once. Like you might only experience yourself as yourself.
I would
There's
argue
like
an infinite
other
number of states. You know,
infinite
the
number,
two states
correct?
being like what you think you exist in, and then all of the other ones which are also happening.
Yes. Yes. It's crazy. And so as in the previous slide, we talked a little bit about this triple universe model and basically how that the moral universe and the imaginal universe, which are not tangible universes, are very much alive and real in life, in the processes of life, because we live in a universe driven by intent. And intent is a strictly moral code. It's a code, right? So it's a underlying, just as in you have DNA or genetic code, this moral code is also acting from a supreme level, the highest absolute level of knowing in the cosmos, right? And so these they're just as real, right? They drive our lives, and it's important to know that because of these, the side effect of being in a quantum state mentally allows you to literally create reality in any way you want. Now, there are limitations because of things such as consensus. When you have consensus in a world and you have infinite untold number of market participants, for example, they also have their own free will to act on the market. So it's not like you could wake up tomorrow in your infinite world and say, I want the price of Hex to be at like 2 cents or 1 cent, or I want it to be at $1, because ultimately you're relying on all of these interconnected layers of thought to decide on where homeostasis is met, right, on the world stage. So until the market's ready, like you can't. There's arguments for that. The deeper you dive into this, like the more you can actually tangibly change your reality, and I mean on a consensus level, right? And that's really exciting stuff, because essentially what that's saying is you can basically transport yourself to an alternate dimension, so to speak. It's like, I don't know if Orca, if you want to try to explain this, but it's kind of like getting into Bitcoin when it was $10, and then before any consensus was made on this idea, there was something inside of you that you were willing to take the risk, right? And so you manifested for yourself like a life altering experience,
Yeah, I think,
because it's kind of about being in time, in sync with time.
and that speaks back to like Nikola Tesla's research in his private journals where he described the genius frequency. And so when you were showing those alpha, beta, delta, gamma waves, he referred to he several times he stated in his personal journal that he cannot take claim produces because he's merely a radio antenna receiving information. And his concept was that the universe and the atmosphere, the ionosphere, is producing these frequencies, and that he would meditate and simply align his internal resonant frequency of being with that of the greater whole, Gaia, the Earth. And so he was being this special gifted knowledge because he chose to open up his, mind, body, and soul to the possibility of learning from this all wise greater entity than himself, right? This concept that there's something larger than ourselves out there. And by utilizing that, he admitted to as being the inspiration behind his achievements. And so I have, from a young age, always had this feeling of a natural pull toward seeking truth and discovering and embracing innovation, embracing community, embracing collective energy. I've seemingly benefited from that in ways where my life experiences have kept me on a path where I haven't undergone extreme danger or harm. I have been to receive great benefits in the form of knowledge that has been imbued to me. Some people don't realize, like, some of the most impactful information I've ever learned came during a restless night where something within me kind of just told me it wasn't time to sleep yet. And so rather than like force myself off from the world, I allowed my body to wander around. And then I would end up in a conversation on the internet, typically with somebody who it was like the middle of the day for them. And I would pick up this tremendous wealth of information that has then shifted the path and approach that I take in life to achieve the goals I had already set. I had begun committing myself to achieving those goals, and through seeming happenstance or randomness, this opportunity aligned within me that then brought me expeditiously on the journey of that exploration of knowledge. And so this is really the human condition, is being able to overcome the individual and prescribe yourself to the reality that there is ultimately something bigger than you, right? The Andes Mountains are bigger than any of us. Even if all of us in the chat stood on top of one another's shoulders, we wouldn't be a blip on the radar compared to these things. So once you just accept that there is something bigger than you, whether it's material, that allows you to break through a lot of the siloed noise, the resonant noise that you've potentially built around yourself, and excluding this wisdom that is available for you to access
Everywhere, right?
you
Infinite.
intend to access it. Exactly. And so that's where I really do there are times where my entire with energy, and it feels like I'm almost like moving out of my skin. It's like I'm permeating into the ether of the entire reality that I exist within, when I'm really tapping into a commitment to participate in this greater whole. Because ultimately the particles on my skin, the electron cloud that they exist within, and the magnetism that they localize within, is permeating constantly with the surrounding environment. And so it's not a far stretch to believe that there is a greater than a non-zero probability that the existence of my physical, measurable, observable self is actually participating in extremely vast distances of space and time that I'm not maybe consciously considering myself to participate in. And so that is where you can really unlock this infinite potential for growth, is by refusing to believe that you are buried under soil. It's that intention and that commitment that allows you to overcome that pressure and to overcome the condensed energy in order to expand. And that's what we call growth.
Yeah, so this is how, again, to kind of reel it back in, like this is how you identify things like a really great investment early, is because you have these fundamental thoughts about growth, right? You're looking for it always. And so the window pane by which you're looking through is got a target lock on it that's looking exactly for that, right? And that's how you're defining your own life for that. So some of us are going to apply it in some ways, and some of us are going to apply it in other ways, and all ways are okay, right? Essentially, you get to live. I can't say this enough. You can create your life to be anything you want, literally, especially in the information age, because of the data rate at which we can communicate and create new innovation, right?
Your life's going to be something, so you might as well make it what you like.
100%.
It's going to give you a fucking card. I promise you. And not 90% of them are not pleasant. And you can really pick what you want nowadays, because there's no really, like, the whole education thing is kind of changing. Like, the way people transmit information is changing. Like, the whole landscape is changing. The financial assets are changing. So you can really recreate yourself at any moment. If not any time, like if you're a young man at this time, like, obviously you could be any age, but it's a great time to start thinking like bigger and start moving forward and start looking for opportunities all the time in your life, and trying to be less distracted by the things that really make no difference. In all of it, nothing really makes a difference, but some things make a fake difference.
We can't say for sure, but I can tell you for sure that all four of us have went from unconscious to increasingly more conscious, because it's just we've all been through some sort of a dark night of the soul, all four of us, and they'll know those things aren't pleasant, but they're the most formative points in your life that will set you on a trajectory, like pulling a rubber band back into darkness and releasing it and watching yourself fly toward the sun. Only you decide where you land, essentially, because it's a momentum-based thing.
Absolutely.
What's up, Wales? See if you can hear him. He's dealing with some crappy mic right now or something. All right. So last thing I want to say about this slide, if you could pull up the slide here, is that we're entering a unique time zone.
Test.
Yes, he's back. He's back, baby. What's up, Wales? You probably can't hear us though. This is a. Well, hold on here. I wanted to define paranormal because to get into the further slides about.
Okay, cool. I had no idea. I wasn't seeing my levels, so my bad.
All right. Can you hear me?
So what was the question? Because I completely forgot it now.
We were talking. Well, we were just the basics of this. Well, I want to.
Can I not hear shit now?
Yeah, he can't hear us. Shit. Sorry about this, guys. Technical difficulties. We can hear you, bro. Yeah.
All right. I guess my mic is messed up.
So para is like a root word.
So I'm just gonna pop over there, but I'll still be listening.
Okay. I'll pull you back in a little bit. So para is a prefix meaning to make ready or to produce or to procure, and normal is defined as character or state of being in accordance with rule or standard. So everyone knows what normal is. Normal is essentially what consensus is, right? because we use consensus and normal as a synonymous terms. So paranormal in essence was to make ready for normality. So it should be the opposite pole of that, right? Because it is that which exists outside of normality. So it informs what consensus normality will be. So paranormality is that which prepares material consciousness, meaning human consciousness, for a stable and normal state of being. Because without that, we would be living in a states of chaos and randomness. So this is like a code level substrate of physical reality, this paranormal element that is hard to define and explain with words and with you only can feel and experience these through emotional charges and non-traditional physical means of explaining. All right, Wales.
Okay, let's see if we can finally get this thing to rocking tonight. Damn.
What's up?
Man, I don't even know. It's like I wasn't meant to be here tonight. It's just crazy. But it's been a good stream so far, so I hope everybody's really paying attention to all the refined information that's being shared because it is very important. At the end of the day, it is kind of as simple as what Jim Rat said earlier, right? You got to live, so you might as well make it a good one. And being able to realize that you have complete control over that, especially today, because of how the world is set up, is critical. I mean, I basically am living the life I wanted to live my whole life. Every day.
Me too, man. It was a challenge, right? It was challenge after challenge, and then you finally break through, and then there's some more challenge, and then you break through another level, and eventually there's a snowball effect, and your
Yep.
life begins unfolding in an exponential curve because
Literally.
you're standing on the strength of all these levels: survival, relationships, and self-esteem. You get that figured out. Well, now
It's
you're
game
now you're
over.
ready for transformation, right? And now you
Yep.
can live the life you want to live. So all these like really fancy esoteric concepts of spirituality is really just universal wisdoms that's basically can be summarized so simply just by um being a good person or being a terrible person, but don't just be nothing, right? Polarize one way or the other and pick and decide who the hell you're going to be. Find the if you're like I said earlier, I'll just recap. If you're not financially well off, if you're struggling physically and mentally, work on your nutrition, work on your exercise, read books, listen to streams. It's all for free on the internet now, you guys. So like just try to break through the resistances in your relationships. Get closer to family because when you do those things that don't seem like they matter or they're not going to have an impact on what you want your life to be, they do. They do in some intangible, unexplainable way. When you build connections, number 6, as you build connections, you build a network. Your career explodes, your finances explodes, your friendships explodes. Ultimately, this is the explosion of spirit out of matter. It's going from a state of unconsciousness into a state of super conscious awareness and becoming superhuman, being able to do things that 1,000 years ago was magic, right? Through the technology and other means. And this is magic. This is literally your United States Department of the Army declassifying a document in 2003 on the Gateway Experience. Now, what is the Gateway Experience? The Gateway Experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence, keyword coherence, to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter your experience of consciousness, your own consciousness, so that by which you experience the picture frame by which you see the world. This moves it outside the physical sphere, means it moves it out of the phenomenal realm of the triple universe theory and moves it into these other layers or dimensions of life, right? These fractal impressions, these deep thought waves. This is the secret. This is the thing that they have been holding away from you for so long, and they declassified this in 2003. This is ultimately the escape to escape the restrictions of time and space. So no, you can't. This isn't saying you can take your body and move your physical body anywhere in the universe instantaneously and know all things. But what this is saying is that by using this methodology, and ironically, look, here's our sine wave again, energy wave. As you oscillate on this energy oscillation wave, you reach altered states of consciousness that gets you closer to absolute infinity, right? So this is very hard to explain for people because they don't have any reference points by which to understand this. But your own military is saying that this is possible and that they use this strategically, right? And it's all about geometry and number, because number is order, and order is the order of intent in the universe, like we've been talking about all day, that we live in a universe driven on intent. People don't Hex Godbear isn't sitting there dumping the price to a penny and a half because he doesn't think it's going to get there. He's doing that because he knows it's going to get there, because he's very in tune with what's going on with the market. He knows where we're at in a cycle. He's able to do this because he's tapping into the limitless possibilities of the directions of the space-time curve, right? Where we're at in this part of a market cycle, right? And this can be best described by understanding your mind through this triple model: the plane of the spirit, the plane of the mind, and the plane of the will. The will is like the turning left to right, the driving force, the train tracks. That's what decides I want to be a good or bad person, and this is what I want to do with my life. This is the driver of the vehicle being your body. The plane of the mind is that which you need to comprehend and create a framework for so that you can better become super conscious and move yourself into increasingly more successful states of being and being more interconnected with your human society. By doing so, not only do you give back and reciprocate energy flow, but it also creates a better life for you and for the people around you. And the plane of spirit is best understood as the dynamic movement. So it's the movement by which how you get from point A to point Z. And some people that are very spiritual, I put that in quotes, they are able to shift their trajectory quicker than others, or they're slower than others. They're doing it. They're more deliberate with the timing of how they shift and evolve through this reality. And they're able to do it with some form of understanding of this gateway experience and the visionary capacities of the human mind. So as we go into the next few slides, we're going to dig deep into the mind. This is if you're paying attention right now, I need you to sit up straight and look at this graph, because basically what this infographic is trying to create for you is a mind space so that you can understand how to access deeper levels of your own consciousness. So to understand the mind is to understand the brain as a piece of equipment, but that even if you remove a bit of the brain, that the harmonic flows of electrical currents across the brain will shift themselves slightly so that you will still be a functioning human and you can still grow too. And this is proven by neuroscience. There's a neuroscientist that actually did a video on this I watched recently that explained how you can actually remove bits of the brain, but you can still have all these executive functions in the mind, because the mind is like a symphonic orchestra of electricity, and each one has their own signature or electromagnetic signature by which they're living their life by. That's like their personality and all these acquired attachments that creates the personality complex. So the personality complex comes from all these levels of consciousness. So if you want to start early, the pre-conscious would be, again, that paranormal, that which prepares a consciousness coming into a life for a human life. It's your parents having the idea of having a child or not, and then you were born into the world. Well, that was pre-conscious because that was pre-you existing, right? That's the most basic understanding of a paranormal sphere, or the pre-conscious. It's all of the genetic code that was laid to the ground before you ever came into existence to create your existence. The second layer is the unconscious. This is where things go and get stored when you don't address them, and it's literally impossible. Don't try, because it's literally impossible to be ultimately conscious of every single thing going on. That's something to strive for, but that's just unrealistic right now at this point in history. So think of it like when you take in information from your environment, the third sphere is waking conscious. The waking conscious is the free will choice decisions that you make. It can't know every single bit of data that you receive through your eyes, ears, mind, nose, taste, every single micrometer of your skin. Like, you can't know every sensation. You can't know every bit, every atom of your every organ in your system, but you can know of the absolute structure of yourself as human. Define yourself as human. You can, that in and of itself, simplifying reality, is what your waking conscious does. It's where your free will decisions come from. It's where you say, I woke up, I want to get some food, I want to go play golf today, I want to go whatever you want to do. I want to buy hex at a penny. This is the waking conscious, what it's focused on a daily basis. That shifts and changes over time. That's the most fundamental element of what's creating that's moving you forward. When you create goals, the waking consciousness takes the phenomenal manifestation of you, which is the body, and it moves it step by step forward toward that goal. And as you tap into these other zones is when you can start to do that at a hyperbolic speed, because you start understanding the multidimensionality of life, and you can attack life, or you can manipulate life in a way where you can create results faster, or you can like plant seeds in people's minds to create outcomes that are favorable to you. Like, these are tools by which you can understand yourself deeper. So the fourth mental sphere is the sphere of continuing consciousness. It's where in your daily free will thinking brain, you sort of enter this unbroken meditative state, or a lot of people call this like the zone. It's like if you're doing a workout and time seems to pass by in a snap, or if you're playing, you're playing in the big game, and your team's winning and everything feels like it's perfectly in sync. This is when you're in the zone. This is like the sphere of unbroken meditation, and it's the beginning levels of where superhuman capacities start to manifest into the world physically, right? Because, give you an example of potentially like an all-star team that just consensus said nobody can beat those guys. Let's use the American hockey team that beat the Russians back in the 80s or whatever in the Olympics. Nobody could beat those guys, but somehow these guys created this level of connection amongst themselves and hit this level of the zone, this unbroken meditative state, where they were finally able to break through and do the quote unquote impossible, because they were accessing deeper levels of connection with each other, which unlocked capacities in them individually. The fifth mental sphere is the sphere of the superconscious. This is where the higher self exists, which is also could be defined as executive function. It's the place by which, if you are moving through life, you have kind of like you're moving through life and you kind of have like a much more broader view of things, and you look at things more neutrally. And this comes with years of self-study and study of the people and environment around you. You start tapping into the super conscious states of mind where you'll have these great revelations, and and these will be life altering in a snap. Like, as you gain more and more executive function, you'll find that your life is on a trajectory toward a nodal point, and that's just a point in time where you have this revelatory experience, and it totally changes your perspective on life and it evolves you, and it evolves your environment. And a good example of this is having children. You can go through your whole life not understanding an aspect of yourself, and then you can see that your kid has developed that aspect that you did not know existed in yourself, and then you'll see it and you'll recognize it, and you'll have this dawning moment where you'll be like, oh my God, like I totally understand that now about the kid and about me, right? Just as an example, I don't know if anyone else has had a similar experience. So before I let Orca or Whales or GymRat talk on on these concepts, we'll talk lastly about the sixth and seventh spheres of consciousness. The sixth sphere of consciousness is the consciousness of telepathic reception. So what does that mean? That means that you live in a state of total surrender, not in a naive sort of way or a weakness sort of way, but you are fully solidified within the self, but you surrender to higher and higher sets of wisdom, so that the wisdom ends up being the ultimate driver, and you stop having a free will choice because the wisdom is already telling the truth. So that'll just come through. And eventually what you do is you submit to some sort of higher wisdom. And I don't want to define it as like anything, because everybody's experience of this higher knowing is different and everyone can define it differently. But ultimately, as you piece these conscious spheres, layers of your mind, you come up with a whole system for knowing yourself and your species. And when you can do that, you're living from a state of the holo mind perceiver. What this is it's the neural net of the planet. It's the planet as known as the human species. So the combined compounded information database of all human knowledge is essentially overlaid across the Earth's atmosphere, right? Or you could say it's overlaid through the electronic tubes of the internet. That's how we can access it. We can access this information in different ways. And it's important not to close off any which way, because data can come in from any multidimensional angle in a world filled of just strictly consciousness, because consciousness is physical, it's moral, it's imaginal, not imaginary in the sense that fake or like not real, but imaginal in that the visionary complex. So the best way I can describe that is Steve Jobs had the idea for the iPhone, and it was just an idea, and it was an idea that was probably never going to come into existence. But then he did it. He formulated this blueprint in his mind and transduced that high level wisdom down through his system. And through years of excruciating business decisions, he ended up changing the world fundamentally through technology. So this is where I'll pass it off to you guys.
I guess I could jump in since you guys are taking a little while. So, it's kind of a funny thing when you think about how the mind works and how you can cue the mind up to do things that you didn't really think you could do before. When we enter this realm of investing and trading and whatever have you, we essentially have to learn how to rewire ourselves because we're not essentially built to actually play this game. And this is why people find a lot of resistance and friction, when they're going up this learning curve that is getting involved in markets, because it's just not intuitive. And that's just kind of the whole thing about it, right? It seems easy on the surface, but it is easy, and that's why you easily mess it up. This is why we have to sit here and explain the importance of time and how it actually functions and how you're in complete control of it. It's
Awesome.
almost it's almost like it should be intuitive, but it's not, right?
I think you're right. I think as you develop these capacities, you let intuition be a driving force. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those critical things because how do you find a way around that, right? It's not easy when you don't see one.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible. This stuff's not taught in any
Yeah, exactly.
way. So how are you supposed to how are you supposed to get through a multidimensional universe thinking you're one dimensional? Like
Yeah, you're not.
your mind needs to go through a process even just to extrapolate out and become these layers, because for a lot of people, they're operating from a completely unconscious perspective. They're not even tapping
Hmm.
into the other layers, right? And I think that's where this is aimed at people probably on step 3 or 4 that are starting to learn this stuff and they just want a little more information, because you're not going to reach the unconscious. They're too far. They have a lot of work to do before they can even start to receive this information. It's operating on a completely different frequency than they're even able to receive.
100%. It's just not. It's not expected, so it can't be received, right? It's kind of one of those things where you can't accept it because you can't see it.
100%. Can't see it, you can't feel it. You have no
Uh,
you have
no
no reference
conceptual.
points to it.
Yeah.
You know,
no interest in it. Like
no
you just
interest in it.
can't see it. Yeah, like you just can't even help yourself see it.
Nope. It's almost like I don't even know what is it like, Jim Rat? Like freaking. It's like when people say
Well,
lemmings.
but
That's what.
it's just they don't want to find anything out like that. You know what I mean? That's a lot of
Well,
Hmm.
remember they were
Yeah.
fear-based. Those guys are
yeah. They just
scared and
think
unconscious. They
about
don't.
working, uncomfortable situations, feeling uncomfortable emotionally during the day. That's what mostly people think about.
Yeah. Also, you know, people. One of the big stumbling blocks is people identify with their ego, and they don't know that their ego is a limiter. So like,
Yes.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
hilarious because to me because the mostly like the people that get hurt by things that are said, especially online, are the ones that have the biggest egos. They're because they're just projecting and reflecting back what they're feeling internally, which is why we the three of us can sit here and be truthful to ourselves. And honestly, don't I don't give two shits like what anybody really thinks about me because from the perspective of it's not going to stop me from being myself, right? I care what you guys think about me, but I don't care to the point where it's going to stop me from staying in alignment, right? Because being in alignment is what got me here, which got me an audience, which got me into hex, like into crypto mining 7 years ago. Like I'm on a path, like so, like I've already found that, and it's challenging to get to that point. And I think that just keep your head going, help and keep learning, and you'll eventually be able to move through life in a frictionless way, and that's ultimately your mind, body, and spirit tapping into the same honest, frictionless, global, cross payments, borderless technology of sound money. They're synonymous with each other. When you find one in yourself, it's reflected back to you on the earth plane as sound money. Like that's how I've been able to reframe it. I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts on that.
I do not.
All right.
I think we covered it pretty well because the mind is a tool, right? Just like everything else, and if you don't use it, your life will reflect that. That's something that I've learned the hard way. So if you feel like you're not living the optimal life that you want, unfortunately, it's your own fault.
hmm It is you
Something,
only you can
something to think
be
about.
only you can hold yourself accountable ultimately.
Yeah.
Because eventually, if you make enough bad decisions, everyone will abandon you, and you'll be left to your own devices to try to pick up the pieces on your own. And to get from ground zero back through all these levels, back to this full integration with higher purpose and self mastery, that takes decades of nobody ever reaches full self mastery. No one I know. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. No one I know. So just
Well, I
keep
mean,
these things in mind.
I think the whole thing is just like understanding the importance of discipline, right?
100%.
Because discipline is really the big differentiator between one person and another. It's not really anything else. It's really not.
It goes for
So
diet, exercise, nutrition,
everything,
knowledge, literally everything, discipline.
every single thing. Yep,
hmm
every single thing. Doesn't matter if you're talking about acting, dancing. Doesn't matter. It's all the same. You know,
It's all
if you don't
perfecting
want
your
it,
craft. Yep.
yeah. If you don't want it, you're not gonna get it.
And if you don't use it, you will lose it.
Yep, 100%. So
So
definitely critical.
this slide, just quick, it's kind of representing the same stuff we just went through, but kind of like giving you a graphic so you can kind of see these different levels. So like third dimensional self would be, for example, obviously everybody knows what their third dimensional self is. It's your body, right? And your body has an intelligence to it at the DNA level and the chemical level. And then when you tap into these fourth dimensions, fifth dimensional energies, that's the stuff that's harder to describe because it's not harder to describe from the perspective of Steve Jobs inventing the iPhone and creating and taking an idea and changing the world with it and creating manifest reality with it. But it can be, but in order for you to understand it for yourself, you're going to have to dig deeper on that and find out what those other dimensions mean for you. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but just give you kind of a visual that, and just remind you that as Orca mentioned earlier, that like maybe you're in a high vibrational state, or you're in like a really engaging conversation, or you're in the zone, and then like a piece of paper falls off and like it's just a sign or some sort of a signal from the universe telling you that that subtle energies are trying to give you signs about that you're onto something, or that you're this is all self-defined, and it's hard for science to define what these signs and symbols will mean to you, because it's up to the individual and their level of awareness to perceive these things, right? So the universe is always trying to give you signs, and you need to be trying to increase your awareness of these things to know, for example, when a market's bottoming or when a market's topped. I'm just using that as a very basic example. Just like it's very simple. Just listen to the consensus. Once consensus gets swayed one way too much, that's when you know you can safely take some off the table or add some. This slide here is kind of going into a lot, honestly. We're talking about a 13,000-year timeline of history, and the shift of consciousness over time, from pre-Dark Ages, where we had tremendous societies like the Egyptian society, and prior to that, there's records of transcendental societies that might have existed. And if you want to dig into that on your own, you're more than welcome. But just the graph here is basically, again, that same sine wave formation of us going through the drought of consciousness 2,000 years ago, and how we're now coming out to modern day, where humanity once again is getting a chance to go exponential, right? And this graphic on the left, it's basically trying to describe the timeline of the human from an unconscious state of mind through the levels until the species itself became increasingly more conscious by understanding itself in the cosmos. So it's a very big idea. And ultimately, once the human knows the earth and knows its mind, it can start to understand its time. And if it can understand its time, it can truly understand its place in the matrix of life, which is all fractally driven. These are very large concepts, and they might not fully be relayed in this presentation because we're getting near the end here. But these are important things that if you are drawn to these ideas, that you take the time to search and look into this stuff, because that's like your own calling. Your own soul is like asking you to like look deeper into these things, right? So I won't spend too much time on this slide, because here we go. We get to talk more specifically about time and how that plays a role right now in this point in history. So if we got to stop thinking of time as like a linear progression from like the year 1900 to the year 2022 in a straight line, we got to start thinking of time more of like a space. Like, you know how you think of like Texas compared to Japan, compared to Australia, compared to Europe. These are places, spaces, and time is the same way. Like, you need to think of time as in time zones, more like spaces in history. If history was a space, like if you could extrapolate out and see our solar system moving through space, you would see that every 10,000 years we come back into this light photon band here, where all of the energy is highly charged and all the particles are highly charged, and it has a serious effect on our sun, which then has an effect on the life on the planets. So our solar system has basically re-entered this 2,000-year band that increases the rate at which life in this solar system evolves and and to like give you a visual for what moving forward through time looks like, you look at this spiral graph. Imagine these are galaxies moving through space. Well, they don't move in a straight line. They move in a circular or people say time is cyclical, it's actually radial because it's moving forward in a spiral form. So radial is the true nature of time. Cyclical is a 2D expression of time. We're actually a radial species, but we just don't understand that yet. This is because we don't understand the multidimensionality of our own lives. And we also don't understand why blockchain is important right now. We might like to chase the mad gains, but the mad gains are there as a function of the times. You know, being early on life-changing technology and this sort of thing. If you go outside and you look, and you're in the mountains and you look up into the sky, you're going to see the galactic midplane, and you're going to see this photon belt, and it looks just like this. I've seen it with my own eyes. And it's because we were born in a unique time in history where we're going through a highly charged period of evolution for the species. And only by understanding cosmic time zones as periods of history can we try to keep in our forefront of our awareness what time really is and its frequency or amplitude of experience. So, like, your experience of time can be completely relative. If you're in a zone, it's going to go fast. If you're in a place of pain, it's going to go really slow. So, like, I was telling you guys that we live in a universe driven by intent, and that's what creates the order in the universe. That's where wisdom filters down through the energy centers, down through to the human level, and that's by which you can act from a higher and higher level. That's harmonic. That's being in time, being on time, and kind of having an understanding of order in a world of intent. Disharmonic time, again, would be like chaos, which would be like anarchy or seemingly random events caused by random causation of a world without intent. So the beauty of human life is that you can use your free will to basically prescribe to either one. And there's no difference either way, one way or the other, because essentially the reality of this time is that all human free will fits within the defined limits of the system of consensus on Earth. So natural time never stops. It's just the way that we measure time that changes, right? So, like, when you break up our solar year, the Gregorian calendar breaks it up into 12 months that are completely discordant. There's no reason why you need to do it this way. All this does is causes irregularities and the cycles or the radial nature of time. So if you take it and you harmonize it with the moon cycle and do 13 months with 28 days apiece, they're harmonic. It's 28 days, 28 days, 28 days, 28 days, 28 days. Every month is 28 days, which matches up with the woman's fertility cycle, and it matches up with the moon cycle. And that leaves you with one remainder day, which is the day of the year day. That's a day out of time. This is called the harmonic timing construct. And if humans were to adopt such a construct, it would have consequences on the world that are hard to put into words, but it's similar to the exponential growth curve that you're experiencing right now in technology and connectedness of the planet. It's because this cannot be denied. This is already happening, even if we're still operating in this 1260 frequency, a regular artificial timing construct. This is still naturally happening at an energetic level. So it's really only a matter of time until the human perception adopts some other sort of timing frequency on a global scale. Now, talk about a paramount, like a huge bit of resistance trying to enact an entire new timing model. But the point is that this is already happening, even if we're not aware of it on the energetic level, because of where we're at in the photon belt, just entering a new energetic golden age for humanity. It's easy to look around and see on the media negativity and chaos and disorder, because that's the consequence of the old way of measuring timing frequencies with the natural timing frequency that's actually happening through the cosmological clock of all of the heavenly bodies interacting with each other and their gravitational pulls with for and against each other. This is all perfectly in time, right? Because it cannot be. None of us humans has the power to shift the course of our solar system so much that we could not no longer be in the photon belt, for example. So it's key. Understand, do you want to align with harmonic time or do you want to align with disharmonic time? Because both are, it's a choice. But one of these two times is not going to exist in the future, and this is what you call a timeline. So this is one of our last slides, and it's probably one of the most interesting things philosophically for me. It's the idea that humans can time travel. And what I mean by that is, in modern man's worldview, planning is like the closest idea we have to time travel, because essentially what it is that when you plan to do something in the future, you know you want to get to Z, but you're at step A, and you don't necessarily know all of how that will play out, and that's the experiential element with some of the random elements of the consensus world acting on your choices. But you can know that as our frequencies increase, as our technologies increase, as we get more interconnected and evolve more mentally and spiritually and physically, we will become more in time, and we'll learn that ultimately synchronicity is the guiding principle of this universe. That it's impossible not to be perfectly in time when you're allowing deep wisdom to be the driver of your life, and ultimately aligning with full truth as best you can. So if to understand time travel philosophically, if time travel exists, it has always existed. Now, theoretical physics says that it's possible. Mathematics is saying on a quantum level, yes, this is very possible. And Orca talked a lot about this earlier, about quantum entanglement and infinite realities coexisting on multiple dimensions. This is basically your choice every day to wake up and tap into the dimension you want to be living in and being a part of. What dream world do you want to create for yourself? Well, this is all because time travel is possible, because by the nature of itself, if time travel exists, it has always existed. Now, modern man's relationship to time travel is planning, which is a slower cause and effect relationship of time travel. It takes time, right? It takes time in a linear sense. So think of time like a compass, like you're moving through space, you're moving through time. Now, you need to understand that, and this ties back into Hex and the T-share rate too. Like, all that really exists is now time. So in the case of Hex, the only thing that matters to you if you're a no coiner is and if you want to get yield on sound money, the only thing you're going to get is what the share rate's going to give you that day, because that's what is now. But we can know that in the future, it's programmatically planned that if you could time travel to the future, the share rate's going to be more than it is now, right? So when I say hexagons are from the future, it's literally because the people that stake long, they understand the mechanism by which this is acting, and it's actually bonding. It's a compound bonded yield bonded to the electromagnetics of the earth itself, right? It's very foundational to sound money. What's more real than that, right? Immutable code bound to the electromagnetic pole of the earth. Well, pretty sure we're going to be on the earth for the rest of our lives. Pretty sure it's got an electromagnetic force, and that we measure space based on it, and we measure time based on the time zones, which are spatial segments fragmented off of the North Pole. So we can know that if you're locking yourself into something that's tied through space in the form of blocks on a chain, in the form of a time chain, that ultimately you're taking your stake in a future sound money system that is going to have like crazy returns, like from the simple premise of the value proposition of what I just said. Give you some time to think about that for a second, because this is like how I understood Hex early on, and I knew that this gut-wrenching feeling when I wasn't staking Hex when T-shares were $60, I just knew internally, my intuition was telling me, like, you got to do this. Like, been listening to my intuition for a long time already, And when I didn't do what it said, I felt terrible. Felt ill, like literally ill. Because I'm tapped in very deeply into these concepts and they're driving my life forward and they can be very powerful, very foundational. So like listen to your gut, and if you don't get the result you want, reorient and reassess, and then try again, because you can have a couple failures, but if you're not failing, you're not trying, right? So just try. So the timelines thing, just by the nature of energy and visualization, you can create for yourself any timeline you want within a certain consensus reality that is shared amongst us. Unless you become so transcendent that you can literally vaporize yourself through a wall, which I don't know anybody that's there yet. Not saying it's not possible, 'cause from a quantum level, it is possible, because communication can happen between twin particles across any distance by just flipping the charge. Pretty fascinating stuff. So the limits to this time travel notion is that you're limited by the amount of energy needed to create the desired outcome. So whether that be some sort of technological device that is some super futuristic energy source that's super huge, or whether that's like some sort of spiritual source of energy that is infinite in capacity. Everybody's different how they're going to approach this, and it's not right or wrong to do it one way or the other. Ultimately, you're only limited by what you believe is the limits of your energy source. So I don't know if you guys want to hop in on any of these last few slides. If you do, just go ahead and say something. Otherwise, I'll try to close it out here. You there, Wells?
I think, yeah, I'm here. I think it's just important for people to really focus on the main theme, right, and how it's critical for them to understand that they can actually manipulate time to benefit them more so now than ever before, and that's kind of the whole point of everything that's been said in this stream. You can manipulate space time once you begin to understand how reality actually works. And this is really the crux of everything that's being said over the past few hours. How do you get to a point where your life is what you want it to be? It's by taking the actions that are going to get you there. It's literally no other way.
I love that,
And
dude.
that's really all I got to say.
That's, I mean, what else needs to be said? Like, we've basically tried to give you so much detail and nuance and granularity about the layers of mind and about how to get healthy physically, about the technology that's coming down the pipe through the space race, the great space race, and all of the turmoil amongst the fiat markets and the credit markets, and where all that money's moving from west to east. This is a tremendous time of change in the universe. It's a tremendous time of change on Earth, and we all can have stake in it if we're only aware enough to pay attention to make that happen for ourselves. So make sure you purchase land if you can. Cut cables, meaning at night when you go to sleep, turn off your Wi-Fi or turn off your 4G, turn on airplane mode on your phone, turn off your Wi-Fi on your phone if it sits next to your head. Because from personal experience, when I started doing that, I started having crazy wild dreams, and I wasn't having dreams before that. I was like, wow, these electromagnetic frequencies really are affecting me. Kind of like something I knew but didn't know type thing. So it's serious. Cut cables when you can. Shield yourself. You're an electromagnetic being just as much as you're a physical chemical being. Get rest and recovery and love your family. Do what you can over the next few years to delete all of your consumer debt. Cook your own food when you can and grow your own garden if you can. Honor your ancestors and build a community. Online or offline, it doesn't matter. Just be connected, become more connected, because if you have health issues, being more connected is going to heal you. Simply put. Keep searching for new knowledge, make your life a permanent study, and support independent thinking, and spend time in nature, and make sure you ground yourself. Probably a good time to pull up the panel. I don't know if you're there, Bullish. He might be gone. If he's gone, we'll just go through a couple bonus slides.
Yeah, he stepped away. So you might
All
as well.
right. All right. So this is just kind of like we're past the point now where we're kind of done with the main talking points, but this is just kind of like a cool slide that shows you a mycelium network, which if you don't know, fungus is like without fungus, nothing can grow basically because it's the intermediary connector between all living plant life, like in the soil, because it connects through these. It's called a mycelium network, right? It's like, and it looks just like the neural network of a brain. It's amazing to me that these fractal patterns play out in our own biology the same way that they play out in plant life. Same could be said for a star system. You can see a similar formation. And then on the right, we have a 3D map of stars. This is basically just trying to show you the shape of the Milky Way galaxy. And I thought it was funny that looked like an energy wave like we've been showing for the last 2 live streams. We've basically been showing you guys the sine wave. It's everywhere. It permeates every layer of the holographic universe. This slide here is just it's basically a bunch of old ancient education systems, old ancient teachings that are all kind of saying the same thing about the 9 dimensions, and they all describe them in different languages in different ways, but somehow they all came up with a similar pattern. And remember, pattern recognition is a sign of intelligence. So if humans all across the globe that were culturally different and didn't have connections to each other were all saying the same thing, it kind of makes you wonder, you know, what's actually happening, right? What's actually going on here? I think by now you should at least be questioning if you came into this stream thinking everything was just a physical universe and you stuck it out, it had to have been something compelling enough to keep you here that you're like, huh, maybe there is multidimensionality to life, right? And here's the flower of life, and here's a cell as it's fertilized, as it divides. It's the same pattern recognition you see in this flower of life as it is in the cell dividing, right? So these fractals, they're playing out holographically on all these different levels, and it's all just code, genetic code, or language codes, or moral codes that decide the direction of all these life processes playing out. Don't know if I want to say much on this slide. Let me just give you guys a look at this slide. It's a framework for understanding what we've already talked about the mental spheres, about pre-conscious, unconscious, and how this is kind of like a charging battery, and how you can use these different layers to identify aspects of the self and try to create the life you want to live. You know, how many dimensions do we live in simultaneously? You know, good question. This book here is saying that the human has at least 5-dimensional potentiality. So, very compelling, very interesting. This is an interesting slide here. It's trying to describe the relationship between ultimate absolute wisdom and how that filters down through these different layers or dimensions of life, right? So it's if this is us here on the 3rd dimension, the world of manifest projections, what happens here is built on top of the atomic or cellular dimension, which is the foundation for the vital sensory energetics or 2nd dimension, which would be like animal and plant life, right? And then the 3rd dimension would be the world of manifest projections, which is the first mind layer, which is where matter, human biology, manifests into the world through the mind. instead of it just being autonomous, like dogs being dogs, fish being fish, deer being deer. This is where species become self-aware and are able to manifest projections into the world and create their own realities. So they essentially are breaking the space-time construct as they tap into the fourth dimension, which is the time pulsar, which is where the synchronic order and the understanding of timing frequencies and energetics comes in, and deep physics, right? And then above that, you get the fifth dimension, which is the energy field system, which is where you basically come to a really deep understanding of the matrix that drives life. And that's actually available if you want. Hit me up. I can send you a graphic on like what that matrix looks like. And many different disciplines have come up with different frameworks about how to define it and produce meaningful results or meaningful feedback for you that you can get like real meaningful life changing or just help you get through your day information just from numbers, right? And then above that would be like the light codes, and above that would be like what you'd call God or like the ultimate absolute wisdom, which taps into the void where all this stuff just repeats. So in closing, there is a lot to know, and been a lot that's been withheld. And as a Hexican, I take a lot of pride in being a Hexican. I take a lot of pride in being a Bitcoiner and Ethereum too. And that they're going to shift the sound money landscape, which is going to give us a foundation by which to build the world we want to live in. This is the most simple way I can put it. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be ignorant of all the deeper levels of this so that we can do it in a super awesome and powerful way. I just want to thank everyone in the chat for being here. I know it's been super long, super deep, and I appreciate everyone on the panel for their input.
Thank you so much, Axis. This has been great. I've just been taking it all in.
Yeah, it's just groundbreaking stuff when you really sit here and think about it, because it's not even anything like out of this world. When you really, really break it down to bare bones, it's really not.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that because the whole point is to take something ethereal, right? And make it understandable from a human level because we
That's
are
right.
intimately tied into it. We can't escape it.
Nope.
So appreciate you guys. With that, maybe we should Wales and Kareem and I can do a more traditional markets type stream as we get closer to FOMC coming up. Is that the 15th? Not sure, but it's coming up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
So
keep track of that shit.
we'll talk on the back end and see what we can come up with because I know you guys like listening to Wales and Kareem. Kind of reading the chats here. Bullish, if you're good, we're good, brother. Oh shit, GymRat's solid frozen.
Hey, what?
Yeah.
Here, I will message him real quick.
I don't know if anyone's looking at the hex chart, but I just got a message that there was 9 million hex just bought on Uniswap. Did we just hit a new low or something? And it got triggered on order?
No idea. Haven't watched the chart in a while, so I don't know. I'll take it easy, breezy.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir.
We'll be back.
Easiest game to play, so I'm not making it harder than it needs to be.
Love it, man. Be good, brother.
Yes.
Thanks for being here.
Same to you.
All right,
For
peace.
sure.